The moment Tiamat left my mind, Bahamut was watching from the astral plane. He had already noticed me after the half-elf contract was witnessed in the name of the metallic dragon god. His plan was to wait until I grew stronger, then guide me slowly. But while he was dealing with a gold dragon corrupted by the abyss, Tiamat slipped into my mental space first. Bahamut tried to descend. Tiamat's true body blocked him at the edge of the world. The two dragon gods confronted each other without fighting. A direct battle between them would create a divine power storm across multiple planes. So both sides held position instead. Tiamat mocked him. She said a green dragon who wanted equality between races was ironic. But I still carried her bloodline. One day, she believed, I would understand who truly stood on my side. Bahamut gave only one answer. I did not belong to her. Cut to Leora's march. 2,000 elite infantry moved along the western border of Sunset Forest in 4 columns. 4 knights above level 10 rode at the front. Oral Vale stayed beside Leora. He warned her about the Old House Forest records. Deep in Sunset Forest, there had once been a large tribe ruled by a level 16 ogre warlord. Several surrounding principalities had failed to destroy it. Even with elite troops, entering that region was dangerous. Leora showed him the skin above her collarbone. Thin ginkgo leaf patterns glowed faintly there. Then she covered them again. She told him the being they were going to meet was the one who gave her this power. 5 years ago, she signed a contract with him. During the Flame Fiend battle, his power saved her. The prosperity of the forest earldom also came from him. Now he needed her, so she came. Oral did not ask what the contract contained. He only remembered that every time Leora used that power, her clothes covered more of her body. He said nothing. His sword would still stand behind his great-great-granddaughter. The soldiers kept marching. They knew Sunset Forest was dangerous. They knew the stories about monster tribes and demonic beasts. But their commander was Leora Vale, the Count of the Forest. The woman who survived this forest killed the flame demon clone and became known as the Apostle of God. She had given them glory, wealth, and status. Where she led, they followed. Cut to the Abundance defense line. Before dawn, a Knoll sentinel saw movement in the western mist and blew the alarm. The whole line woke. Illyra stepped out and ordered everyone to prepare. The enemy had arrived. At the front came the Slave Legion. 400 starved ogres, more than 800 gnomes, and more than 800 goblins. They wore iron rings and chains. Their weapons were crude pickaxes, stone hammers, and wooden spears. They were not there to win. They were there to consume arrows and stamina. Behind them came the Snakeman Vanguard. 2,000 soldiers formed tight wedge formations, each generally above level 3. The full Snakeman force had 6,000 trained soldiers, 6 generals above level 10, Selara at level 13 and Marith behind them. That was why the slaves did not run. Retreat meant Snakeman punishment. They used mental toxins and bone-devouring snakes on deserters. Death at the defense line was faster than what waited behind them. So the slaves kept walking. Half-elf bows tightened on the wall. Illyra looked at the starving cannon fodder and changed the first target. Not the slaves, the supervisors behind them. The first arrow rain flew over the slave legion and struck toward the snakemen, driving them forward. Shields rose at once. Most arrows were blocked or scraped off scale armor. A few soldiers were hit through gaps, but replacements stepped in before the formation broke. Sareth, the level 10 Snakeman general leading the vanguard, reacted quickly. He knew the half-elves were the real threat. Their arrows could carry spells, and their plant control could ruin the first push. He ordered the javelin throwers forward. 200 Snakeman javelin throwers stepped out. That was a quarter of the tribe's total 800. They were expensive troops, trained from childhood to throw short spears hard enough to pierce iron armor. They threw together. 200 javelins cut through the mist toward the half-elf positions. But Abundance had prepared shields for the archers. Ogres, mutated kobolds, and mutated gnolls stood beside them. Some javelins punched through kobold shields and pierced shoulders. Some tore into gnoll flanks. Some buried themselves in ogre hide. The wounds opened, then they began closing. The kobolds pulled the javelins out and stayed in place. The gnolls healed while glaring at the enemy. The ogres simply removed the spears and kept standing. Illyra understood the danger. If that volley had hit ordinary troops, the line might have lost over 100 people. Against Abundance's elite it hurt, but it did not break through. She ordered the archers to keep suppressing the supervisors and javelin throwers. Then Crag acted. He brought 600 Bloodex gnolls down from the flank. His tribe had joined the alliance, and now they had to prove it. Nybek gave him 300 goblin wolf riders, though it clearly hurt. Those riders were Grayskin's best force, but there was no road back for any of them now. Doran kept 300 armored dwarves on the high ground. The dwarves were not needed for scattered cannon fodder. They were waiting for a real breach. Crag and the Wolf Riders hit the slave legion from the flank. The goal was not to kill every slave. It was to break their formation and force the Snake Man supervisors to fight with their own bodies. Crag split open the first ogre's shoulder, kicked the body back, and ordered his gnolls to drive the slaves to both sides. The slave line collapsed into chaos. Sarith looked past the flank fight and fixed on Alira. She was commanding the Abundance Coalition. Her dragon blood felt similar to Marith's, but mixed with something else. Her pressure was not below Celera's. He needed to test her. Sarith took a short spear, poured his full level 10 battle chi into it, and threw. The spear crossed most of the battlefield with a sonic crack. Alira's wings opened. Gold-green wheatear patterns flashed across them, and she rose just before the spear tore under her feet and blasted a crater into the high ground. Then she drew her bow. Battle Chi formed a light arrow on the string. It dropped from the sky towards Sarith like an emerald meteor. Sarith could not dodge. He crossed his arms to endure it. Selara appeared before him. The level 13 dragon blood snake woman drew her scimitar at the last instant. Dark green Battle Chi wrapped the blade and met Alira's arrow. The shockwave threw nearby snake men off their feet. The light arrow shattered. Selara's scimitar cracked almost through. Her arms trembled and blood ran down the hilt. Alira had nearly killed a level 10 general. Celara had blocked the shot, but the cost told her enough. Abundance's second-in-command was already this strong. The real Dragon Lord had not appeared. Celara ordered the vanguard to retreat. Snakeman's spearmen covered the withdrawal in turns. Shields moved outside, spears stayed behind them, and the formation contracted without panic. Sarith wanted to speak, but Celara stopped him. They had enough information. There was no need to lose trained soldiers here. As for the slaves, if they died, they died. More could be captured from other tribes. The order was cruel, but it was not careless. That made the snake men more dangerous. Crag saw the retreat and spat, but he did not pursue. He knew the regular snake man army could crush Bloodaxe under equal numbers. The vanguard rejoined the main army with fewer than 100 snake man casualties. Only a few javelin throwers were injured. The slave legion paid the real price. More than 2,000 had advanced. Less than 30% escaped back. Celara did not look at the survivors. She took Sarith straight to Marith's ancient tree fortress. Marith coiled high in the moving tree crown, still staring toward Abundance. The power scent had almost disappeared, but he could not forget it. Celara reported that the defense line was stronger than expected, and the winged half-elf commanding it was not inferior to her. Sarith added the details. Some half-elf arrows carried vine fibers that rooted after landing and slowed snake tails and ankles. Mutated kobolds and gnolls healed wounds within breaths, close to ogre-level regeneration. Alira's dragon blood felt similar to Marith's, but clearly different. Marith went silent. One word rose from his bloodline memory. Aberrant dragon. The records were rare, but all of them were heavily marked. A natural mutant, 1 in 10,000. After adulthood, even the weakest recorded survivors became legends. Many reached near divine power. At the same rank, an aberrant dragon could crush an ordinary chromatic dragon. Marith remembered the old stories. One aberrant green dragon built a dragon empire that lasted hundreds of thousands of years, and even made Tiamat lose a clone. One aberrant white dragon obsessed with spells reached legend quickly, made alliances across worlds, and also caused Tiamat losses. Marith did not know the missing half of those records. Only the successful aberrant dragons were remembered. The failed ones died young and left no legend behind. But what he saw still mattered. Ordinary green dragon power made creatures irritable, bloodthirsty, and corrosive. It did not give gnolls ogre-like healing. It did not awaken plant control talents in half-elves. The Master of Abundance was likely an aberrant green dragon fused with another power. Marith's greed cooled. His caution took over. He ordered the army to keep advancing, then camp 10 miles from the Abundance defense line. No one could attack without his command. Anyone who disobeyed would be thrown into the snake pit. Celara was surprised. For the first time, she sensed fear in her master. She still obeyed. Then a voice sounded inside Marith's consciousness. "Child, you seem confused." His dragon blood trembled. He knew the voice without ever hearing it before. No chromatic dragon could mistake her. Tiamat had reached him too. Back at the front, the Snake Man army kept moving. The battered slave remnants were driven ahead again. The ancient tree fortress followed behind, casting a long shadow over the rear ranks. At the abundance line, half-elves counted arrows. Gnolls pulled usable javelins from the mud. Kobolds and dwarves reinforced the defenses. Alira watched snakeman campfires appear in the distance. They would not attack again immediately, not before they understood abundance's hidden cards. She gave the captives to Neris and Grick. The injured would be bandaged. Anyone who could move would enter the captive camp with the ogre prisoners. Anyone who refused to cooperate would be dealt with quickly. Grick warned the camp would be crowded. More than 30 ogres were already inside, and now a few hundred gnomes and goblins had to fit too. Crowded was still better than loose captives. Crag returned with Bloodex morale rising. Doran brought his dwarves back from the flank. Some young dwarves complained they had not fought, and one look from Doran silenced them. Nibek grieved the few dozen wolf riders he had lost, but most had survived. Alira told the allied leaders to divide captives according to the Alliance Covenant, and collect food and materials from Grick's logistics side. Then she spread her dragon wings and flew back toward headquarters. She needed to report to me directly and discuss the next move with Brack and Sivrin. Behind her, Snakeman campfires lit through the trees like cold eyes in the dark. The battle was not over. It had only reached its first pause. Alira came back from the defense line while I was still hearing reports from Brack, Sivrin, and Var. The mutations across my tribe were getting clearer. Kobolds were growing stronger scales and ogre-level recovery. Mutated gnolls had sharper tracking, night vision, and ugly regeneration. Half-elves were awakening plant control talents and drifting closer to the natural elves in dragon memory. Normal dragon influence did not do this. This was abundance mixing with my green dragon bloodline and changing every dependent in its own direction. Then Alira knelt and gave the real news. The first Snakeman wave had been repelled. Their vanguard brought 2,000 regular soldiers and more than 2,000 slaves. Alira beat back General Sarith, but Selara blocked the finishing arrow herself. Selara was on Alira's level, and the Snakeman main force was still almost untouched. 6,000 regular troops camped 10 miles away. Their vanguard lost fewer than 100 regular soldiers. That was not a clean win. It was the first warning. I matched Alira's report with Sivrin's intelligence. The Snakemen still had 5 more generals like Sarith. Their ranks were around level 10, but with Marith's dragon blood and Snakeman combat skills, their real battle power could reach ordinary level 12 to level 14. Their army had 6,000 trained soldiers. Abundance had around 3,000 regular troops, and a little over 4,000 usable fighters after adding vassals and the 3 allied tribes. The mutated elites helped, but they did not erase the gap. But our hand was not empty. I told them a seed I planted years ago had sprouted, and reinforcements should arrive within days. Brack and Var did not get it. Sivrin did, the human girl from years ago. Leora Vale was coming. Alira's worry eased. If Leora brought a human army, troop numbers would stop deciding everything by themselves. The real center would become the duel between me and Marith. That still left the question: what had Marith hidden after years in the core area? But one thing was clear. Below legend, no one could kill me. Cut to the Snakeman camp. Marith coiled inside the crown of the ancient tree fortress, listening to the voice that had just entered his mind. Tiamat gave him a promise. She would appear at the critical moment. He did not fully trust her. His dragon memories warned him not to. But she also told him the aberrant green dragon was only around 10 years old, and that one detail rebuilt his greed. Across the field, he counted 3,000 abundance regulars, vassals, 3 defected tribes, a dragon-winged half-elf, and me. On his side, he had 6,000 regular snakemen, 6 generals, Selara and himself at level 15, close to Great Master. To him, the war was simple. If he beat me, everything else collapsed, and a young green dragon at peak state should crush a hatchling. That was his mistake. Far away, Leora's army was already crossing the final forest road. 2,000 elite infantry marched under moonlight, with dozens of high-ranking knights at the front. Leora rode with Oral Veil beside her, holding the empty necklace from years ago before tucking it away. Her dragon lord was ahead. The road was almost over. Above the world, Bahamut saw Tiamat's move and did not stop it. Marith was a pure chromatic green dragon, so a little guidance from the 5-colored dragon mother did not break the god's rules. Bahamut was there for the real line. Tiamat could scheme, but she could not descend and crush the battle with divine power. So he waited. Back in the Snake Man camp, Solara reorganized the army. 6 generals each took a phalanx. Shield bearers moved to the front. Javelin throwers gathered together. Iron spears pushed through shield gaps. The surviving slaves were driven ahead again. The ancient tree fortress pulled up its roots and followed at the rear. Near its roots, Marith had set a rough statue of the 5-colored dragon mother, built from broken stone with 1 copper coin on it. He had gold, he offered copper. Even with worship, Marith could not stop thinking like a dragon. With 3 comforts in his head, superior troops, Tiamat's attention, and my supposed age, Marith ordered the full charge. Before dawn, horns ripped across the abundance line. Alira flew from her tent and sent orders as the ground shook. Archers to the platforms, kobold shield-bearers forward, gnoll hunters and ogres ready. Crag's gnolls and Nibek's wolf riders to the flanks. Doran's dwarves in reserve. Then my roar rolled out from Rock Hill. I flew over the forest and landed behind the defense line. Brak came with his axe. Sivrin rode a forest wolf. Var led the mutated gnoll hunters. The main camp elites followed. No one needed a speech. The soldiers saw me and straightened. Ahead, 6,000 snakemen advanced in spaced phalanxes, careful enough to blunt area spells. Behind them, the ancient tree fortress shook the ground. In its crown, Marith stared at me with greed, excitement, and caution. Leora was close, but not here yet. The first bodies into our traps were not regular snakemen. They were slaves. More than 1,600 captives remained in this wave, including survivors from the first attack and new prisoners taken from smaller tribes. Starved ogres, gnomes, goblins, and others stumbled forward under snakeman pressure. Some saw the fresh soil and knew it meant traps. They kept walking. Stopping meant death behind them. The ground collapsed. Stakes pierced legs. Thorn vines dragged bodies down. Those behind stepped over the dying because there was no room for mercy. The half-elf archers fired. Crag, Doran, and Nibek watched from our side and understood exactly what alliance had saved their own people from becoming that wave. When nearly half the slaves had fallen, Solara raised her hand. The javelin throwers moved. 800 snakemen advanced in 4 echelons and threw volley after volley at the wall, the platforms, and the front line. Spears punched into shields and trunks. Some soldiers died instantly. Others tore the shafts out while abundance closed the wounds. Alira gripped her bow beside me. I told her to wait. Small fights and demonic beasts were not real war. The middle and lower ranks needed to feel pressure while they still had a chance to survive it. If they could still breathe, I could pull them back. If they died in one hit, no power of mine could turn that into training. So we held. The mutated kobolds and gnolls took the heaviest fire. Ogres hurled boulders into the advance. The phalanxes kept filling every gap. Solara saw the slave wave failing, the javelin pressure weakening, and Abundance's wounded returning too fast. Before the half-elves fully regained rhythm, she sent the phalanxes forward. The full snakeman charge began. 6 generals led the regular army at the wall. Shields rose overhead, spears stabbed through gaps. The formation moved slowly, but it did not stop. Half-elf mages triggered barbed vines from the wall. Snakemen were dragged upside down and shot full of arrows. More pushed through until the first ladders hooked onto the top. Brak split the first officer in half. Var crushed another snakeman's skull. Sivrin threw fireballs and vines wherever the wall bent. Then Sarith reached the top. He launched himself up with his tail and clashed with Brak. Sparks flew. Brak gave half a step. Sarith mocked him as a weak kobold. Brak answered with the axe. Across the line, all 6 generals pushed for breaches. Doran's section cracked when snakemen smashed a 2-meter hole through the wall. He stood in the gap with 300 armored dwarves and ordered them to seal it. His axe split the first snakeman down the middle, and the dwarf shield wall shoved the flood back. Then Solara broke the center. She reached the wall, released dragon-like breath, and blasted open a 4 to 5 meter gap through the vines. She ordered the army through and fixed her eyes on Sivrin. She would handle the warlock. Illyra's light arrow cut across the sky before Solara could enter. Solara drew her backup scimitar and blocked it at the breach. The shockwave threw nearby snakemen off their feet, and the center line shook under the clash. On the forest road, Leora heard the horns and metal. She smelled the blood, saw the vine wall, saw the giant snake tail at the breach, and saw Alira's dragon wings above it. She urged her horse forward. At the breach, the field turned into dark red mud. Dwarves and snakemen died together. More snakemen poured in, and the 6 generals began converging there. Brak and Var sent mutated kobolds and gnolls to reinforce. One kobold took a spear through the body, cut the shaft, pulled the head from his shoulder and charged back as the wound closed. A mutated knoll was split open to the bone, healed in front of the enemy, and kept fighting. The snake men finally understood the problem. Knocking Abundance warriors down was easy. Making them stay down was not. Half-elf archers and mages focused the breach. Arrows fell into the snake man echelons. Fireballs burst in packed ranks. Entangle caught tails. Spike growth split the attackers inside the breach from the troops behind them. The snake men had sorcerers, but too few to keep up. For a while, the battle stalled. Brak fought two generals with a chipped axe. Sivrin kept casting until blood ran from his nose. Var's hunters tore at the flank. Illyra and Celera locked each other down, one above the wall and one below it. I watched the whole lines. Our elites and regeneration were holding it together, but numbers still mattered. If nothing changed, the defense line had maybe 1 hour left. I was about to move. Then the battlefield edge broke open. 2,000 elite infantry came out of the forest in formation. Dozens of high-ranking knights charged in front. The silver-threaded vine flag of House Forest rose above them. Leora rode beneath it on a black warhorse, with Oral beside her. Her voice cut across the battlefield. The Forest Earldom, by order of the Dragon Lord, has come to join the battle. The human infantry smashed into the Snake Man left wing from the flank. That phalanx had already turned toward the central breach, so its side was open. Spears punched in. Knights drove across the front. The left wing began to loosen. Inside the ancient tree fortress, Mareth stood up. His joy vanished. I pulled back the claw I had already moved forward, folded my wings, and lay down again. My abundance power flowed through the ground and into the wounded warriors across the line. Leora had arrived. The seed from years ago had become one of the pieces that could decide this war. Leora's army arrived by smashing into the Snake Man left flank. 2,000 elite infantry and dozens of high-ranking knights hit from the side. The two left phalanxes were already turned toward the breach, so the human charge broke them almost on contact. Fleeing snakemen crashed into the nearby formations and disrupted the center army too. Celara saw it from the breach, hurt and furious, but she still refused to retreat. One retreat order would turn the whole army into a collapse, so she held the line and waited for Mareth. Leora left the tactics to her officers and became what she needed to be: the banner. She rode around the rear of the defense line and reached the high ground with Oral Veil behind her. Then she saw me. 5 years ago, I was a smaller green dragon with a strange power. Now I was over 9 meters long, golden wheatear marks glowing across my scales, horns, wings, and pupils. Leora looked at me once, knelt exactly like she had back then, and said she had returned. Then she gave the important report. The treasure convoy was behind the army. Gold coins, gemstones, and magic materials, all prepared according to my old instructions. Even in the middle of war, that report mattered. Treasure was still tribute, and tribute meant the old contract had borne fruit. Oral finally understood what Leora had dragged him into. The great existence she served was not a hidden saint or secret noble patron. It was me. He studied my body, sensed that Leora's power came from the same source, and remembered that this same power had pulled him back from death years ago. Without it, House Forest would have fallen, so he asked no useless questions. He unfastened his newly forged sword, placed it beside him, and knelt. Oral understood the situation immediately. I told Leora to rise. She had done even better than I expected. Then Mareth roared. From the ancient tree fortress, the 12-meter green dragon rose from the crown like all his patience had finally snapped. His javelin throwers were spent. His left flank was broken. His center was stuck at the breach. Celara was pinned by Illyra, and I still had not moved. He could not wait anymore. His ancestors had warned him never to provoke aberrant dragons. Tiamat had told him the advantage was his. Right now, he only wanted to tear me apart, drink my blood, and take my power. The ancient tree fortress started marching too, roots dragging through the battlefield. I stood from the high ground. Finally, Mareth wanted to test me. I wanted the same thing. He flew toward the defense line first, planning to spray green dragon venom over the wall, rot the mutants at the breach, kill Illyra, and then turn on me. I cut it off before it started. I cut across his attack path before he could fire, and released my own breath attack. His venom was dark green. Mine was gold green, compressed like liquid light. It was smaller than his, but when the two breath attacks collided, mine held. Then it swallowed his. The remaining breath washed downward and erased dozens of snakemen. Mareth froze. He had lived nearly 100 years. Even a level 16 ogre warlord had never dared to take his venom head-on. But I had not only blocked it, I had pushed it back. That was when he realized Tiamat had not exactly lied. She had just left out the part that mattered. Reconciliation was off the table. His army had already reached my wall, and the fight had gone too far. So Marith dropped the breath attack contest and rushed into melee. He was bigger and older. 12 meters against my little over 9, young dragon against juvenile dragon. He believed age would carry him. We collided in the air. Claws tore scales, wings beat hard enough to shake the air. Venom, spells, and gold-green power burst around us while the battlefield below kept burning. Marith had deeper spell reserves. Shield blocked one claw strike. Silent Image threw a false target into my sight. Suggestion tried to force hesitation into my mind. It failed. He tried more than once to break away and strike the abundance line, but I kept cutting him off. If he wanted the battlefield, he had to go through me first. My style was simpler than his. I did not have his pile of legacy spells. I had abundance. I took wounds and healed. I released fine green threads from the sky into my soldiers below. Living fighters recovered. Fallen bodies returned their remaining abundance breath into the soil, helping the others last longer. Then I showed him what had truly changed after my long sleep. I pushed abundance into an uprooted ancient tree. The broken trunk stood back up as a living tree and slammed into Marith's ancient tree fortress. Then I pushed power into clouds, mist, and leftover magic. A cloud mist elemental formed overhead and dropped onto the two Snakeman generals fighting Brack. Their blades passed through it, while cold mist poured into their mouths and slowed them down. This was my new ability, giving temporary life to dead matter. Inside my abundance coverage, the forest itself could become a weapon. Marith started to lose the fight's clean shape. His venom was blocked. His melee strength was not enough. His spells could not reach the line. And now trees and mist were hitting back. He pulled away and made the choice Tiamat had been waiting for. He called her name. Below us, Leora's army and the Abundance Coalition were pushing the Snakemen back. Celara had been badly injured while fighting Alira, Leora, and Oral. The defense line cheered like victory had arrived. I did not lower my guard. Something was changing inside Marith. In the astral realm, Tiamat smiled. This was never about helping him win. The five-colored dragon mother wanted a legal crack in the world, and Marith had just opened it by asking for her help. Her divine power pierced through the barrier and landed on him. Her voice filled his mind, telling him not to fear me and to reclaim the dragon blood he had given his dependents. And Marith accepted. He spoke the reverse incantation of the dragon blood contract, and every snakeman who carried his blood screamed. Celara froze while wounded and pinned. Dragon blood pulled backward out of her body and flew into the sky. Sarith collapsed on the ramparts as blood poured from his severed arm. The other generals fell too. Hundreds of streams of green dragon blood rose from the battlefield and gathered around Marith. His wounds closed, his scales darkened, his wing spurs thickened. His body expanded from 12 meters to nearly 15, and his aura broke through level 15 into Great Master. Then the second problem opened under the ancient tree fortress. A thin spatial crack tore apart, and tens of thousands of dretches poured out. They were weak demons, only around 1 meter 20, but each could release stinking cloud once a day. Green stink spread across the defense line. Visibility dropped. Soldiers became dizzy and slow. Behind the dretches came the real blades. 5 Abishai stepped from the crack. 1 red, 1 blue, 1 green, 1 black, and 1 white. Each stood over 2 meters tall and carried level 15 strength. Tiamat had not sent an army to win cleanly. She sent enough chaos to buy time. In the astral realm, Bahamut moved at once. Tiamat had used the loophole of a willing believer's summons, but this was still open provocation. He warned her she had crossed the line. Tiamat knew it. Her divine power was holding Marith's unstable Great Master state and the spatial crack at the same time, and every second cost more. Her plan was simple. Let Marith and the Abishai beat me fast, drag me into her divine realm, and make Bahamut's outrage useless after the fact. Marith hovered in front of me, now almost 15 meters long and drunk on borrowed power. He asked if I still thought I could win. I looked at him. I looked at the dretches flooding the field. I looked at the 5 Abishai rushing toward my people. Then I opened my wings. The wheat-ear marks on my membranes lit up, and abundance burst outward from me in every direction. Several miles of battlefield woke up at once. Trees rose, mud giants pulled themselves from the ground. Water elementals formed from soaked soil and battle mist. This was my revitalization domain. Inside it, dead matter gained life, and the region became my weapon. I looked down at Marith and asked him the same question back. How about now? In the astral realm, both dragon gods went silent. Tiamat could feel my power through the will attached to Marith. It was not a green dragon mutation mutation or borrowed divine power. It was an origin-like authority outside this world's known systems. For the first time, even she wanted it badly enough to risk crossing the barrier herself. Bahamut saw it too. I was not merely an aberrant dragon anymore. If I survived, I could become at least quasi-divine. On the battlefield, my domain turned the forest into a living armory. And Marith lost his mind. Tiamat had not taken control of him yet. His own greed did that. He was too close to abundance, too full of stolen blood and divine power, and too unstable to think. He charged straight at me with no defense. So I made something new. Mist, tree debris, water vapor, and abundance twisted together in the air. In a few breaths, an eastern dragon formed in front of me. Wingless and long-bodied, with emerald wood-grain scales, vine horns, water whiskers, and ironwood claws. Its pupils carried the same golden wheatear marks as mine. The wooden dragon shot forward and coiled around Marith before he could react. The more he struggled, the tighter it bound him. Then it dragged him down. Both dragons crashed into the center of the battlefield and smashed open a deep pit. For a moment, everyone looked there. Abundant soldiers, snakemen, dretches, Abishai, all of them. At the bottom, Marith was pinned by a wooden dragon this world had never seen before. I landed at the edge of the pit and looked down at my sudden invention. The move had worked better than expected. The 5 Abishai rushed at me. They did not reach me. Oral, Illyra, Brack, Var, and Leora intercepted them together. Oral, a level 16 Great Master, held the red and green Abishai with twin swords. Illyra wounded the blue and black ones from the air. Brack and Var locked down the white one, with Brack holding the front and Var tearing at the flank. Behind them, Leora became the support core. Threads of abundance healed bruises, torn wings, and deep wounds while she cast Entangle, Spike Growth, and Slow. 5 defenders held 5 level 15 Abishai. The main battlefield shifted too. Abundance troops and human infantry advanced on the Dretch swarm from 2 sides. Half-elf archers poured arrows into the densest clusters. Kobold shieldbearers pushed forward. Mages dropped fireballs. Human spear phalanxes cleared rows at a time. Inside my domain, fear lost its grip. As long as fighters did not die instantly, abundance closed wounds and pushed them back into the fight. The Dretches had numbers and stinking cloud. We had arrows, fire, spears, and a battlefield that refused to stay dead. Victory looked close. Then the pit cracked. The wooden dragon was torn apart from inside. Marith rose from the wreckage, but his eyes were no longer his. 5-colored divine power covered his pupils. Tiamat had seized the body after Marith's mind collapsed. She called him waste. A great master young green dragon could not handle a 10-year-old dragon cub, so she had to step in herself. The body spread its wings and rose from the pit. Tiamat looked over the retreating Dretches, the suppressed Abishai, and finally me. She called us disobedient children. Then 5 colors gathered in Marith's claw. Red fire, blue lightning, green venom, black acid, and white frost, forced together by divine power until the air bent around it. The pressure was completely different from Marith's. This was no longer a young green dragon throwing borrowed strength around. This was Tiamat's consciousness descending through him. I hovered across from her, my golden wheatear pupils still turning. Divine descent, fine, then let's try it. The 5-colored energy ball left Tiamat's claw. Fire, lightning, venom, acid, and frost twisted together under divine power. Even through Marith's stolen body, this attack was far beyond what any great master dragon should release. I sent one order through every contract at once. Evacuate. On the ground, Leora pulled back her staff and ordered the retreat. Oral forced the red Abishai away and dragged Brack back with him. Illyra folded her wings, rose from her dive, and shot the black Abishai back before it could pursue. Var was the last to leave. My remaining treants surged in from the flank and blocked the 5 Abishai long enough for the Abundance Coalition and human infantry to withdraw with the wounded. The center of the battlefield emptied fast. Burning tree debris, corpses, and Dretches remained in the killing ground. I gathered the power of abundance scattered across the field and condensed it into dozens of wooden dragons. They rose together and formed a layered defense in front of me. The first wooden dragon touched the 5-colored orb and disintegrated. The second shattered, then the third, fourth, and fifth. By the 10th, the orb had dimmed by nearly 30%. By the last, it had shrunk and destabilized. But it still hit me. The blast lit the whole battlefield. Fire burned through my left wings. Lightning tore off my right front claw at the wrist. Acid and venom corroded the left half of my head, snapped part of my horn, stripped my scales, and blinded my left eye. Frost froze my right wingtip until it shattered. I fell from the sky and smashed into the center of the battlefield. For a moment, I was wreckage with a pulse. Then abundance began repairing me. Gold-green light surged around the severed claw. Bone and muscle regrew. A new eye formed in the ruined socket. Tiamat looked down from the air. That five-colored strike was the strongest blow Marith's body could bear, and it should have killed anything below legend. She formed red dragon flame in her claw, ready to finish it. I raised my head from the pit. Do you think you have won, Tiamat? The animated treants, mud giants, and elementals across the battlefield lost life at the same instant. Then the earth woke up. Every trace of abundance in the battlefield, every remaining breath of life in fallen bodies, every tree, vine, and blade of grass began converging beneath me. Gold-green light rose from the soil. Vines, earth, and ironwood intertwined into a throne. Its base drove deep into the ley lines of sunset forest. Vine patterns breathed across the backrest, and two wooden dragon heads rose at the top, their eyes glowing with golden wheatear marks. The throne lifted me from the pit, while my body continued healing. For the first time, Tiamat looked shocked. She threw the red dragon flame. The throne absorbed it. The vines grew stronger, and new flame-patterned lines appeared across the backrest. Every second, its roots sank deeper into the forest ley lines. This place was no longer just my battlefield. It was becoming my domains. And inside this domain, the land itself rejected her. Then a golden shadow appeared on the horizon. Orlia Ridden, a level 19 adult gold dragon and the strongest dragon Bahamut could find nearby, flew toward the battlefield under his decree. She had expected a support mission. When she reached Sunset Forest, the aura inside made even her hesitate. But Bahamut had sent her, so she came. Tiamat understood what Orlia's arrival meant. A powerful gold dragon could become Bahamut's vessel the same way Marith had become hers. So Tiamat moved first. She flew Marith's body above the five Abishai. They looked up, thinking the dragon mother had come to support them. Instead, she swallowed them. The Abishai did not even have time to resist. Their dragon blood belonged to Tiamat, and she reclaimed it in one breath. 4 new heads swelled from Marith's neck, red, blue, black, and white. Together with the original green head, 5 dragon heads opened their eyes under one will. Marith's body expanded again. His wingspan passed 30 meters. His aura crossed Great Master and rose above the legend threshold. Tiamat had used Marith and the 5 Abishai as mediums to manifest a saint body. It cost her centuries of accumulated divine power, but it gave her a legend tier avatar on the battlefield. She looked at me and declared that a level 13 adolescent dragon had already done enough by pushing her this far. Then my throne began to shake. Its roots plunged deeper. Vines spread outward and gathered every thread of abundance in the domain. A gold-green pillar of light shot into the sky. Huge roots tore through the battlefield. A trunk rose from the earth, thick enough that dozens of warriors could not surround it. Branches climbed layer by layer until the canopy blocked the sun and pierced the clouds. Gold-green light fell through the leaves and covered the battlefield. I stood at the center of that giant tree, guiding it and being carried by it at the same time. A name came to me, the Abundance Giant. Orlia reached the battlefield and saw 2 impossible things at once: a 5-headed legend tier dragon controlled by Tiamat, and a hundreds-meter abundance tree whose aura felt like the whole region had grown a will. The Abundance Coalition and the human army had already pulled back to the vine walls. Wounded soldiers lay under the spreading light as their injuries closed. Oral stood at the front with Leora. Brack, Sivrin, Var, and Alira stood behind them. Everyone understood the same thing. From here, this war belonged to the giants. The Giant Moo's crown fully opened. Golden-green rays shaped a dragon body in front of the tree, almost identical to my true form. This was my Giant Moo clone, sharing my consciousness and carrying about 80% of my strength. As long as the Giant Moo lived, the clone could be destroyed and rebuilt again and again by drawing energy through the roots. The tree was not just a body. It was an energy filter, a weapon factory, and a living fortress. Hundreds of dark green fruits grew across its branches. They fused my green dragon venom with abundance. Once they shattered, the venom would corrode flesh, while abundance invaded life itself, warping survivors into mindless monsters. The Giant Moo launched the fruits. Tiamat's green head spat venom to intercept them. The red head burned more from the sky. The blue head fired lightning into my forming clone, blasting a hole through its chest. The wound repaired at once. Then all 5 heads opened together. A 5-element dragon breath swept toward the Giantmu. The ground in front of the tree was carved into a burning trench. My clone stepped in front of the trunk and was torn apart. A second clone formed, then a third, then a fourth. Tiamat kept destroying them, and the Giantmu kept rebuilding them. At the same time, venom fruits curved in from the flanks and above. More than a dozen broke through and burst against Tiamat's scales. Abundance-laced venom seeped through the gaps and disrupted the flow of divine power in the saint body. Her movement stuttered. Then Orlia harassed from the flank and drew Tiamat's attention. The red and white heads turned together. Fire and frost merged into one breath and struck the gold dragon head-on. Orlia's scales shattered. Her body fell from the sky and smashed into the ground, barely alive. That crossed Bahamut's line. Platinum power descended from beyond the world. Orlia stood again, but her eyes had become deep blue. Bahamut had entered through her body. He said only one thing. Tiamat had crossed the lines. Then he attacked. His platinum breath attack met Tiamat's 5-colored torrent and forced it backward. He pressed forward with force-field claws, swept his tail, and unfolded a holy halo that shielded both himself and the Giantmu from damage and negative states. Tiamat struck him with fire and lightning. He took both head-on. Then Bahamut formed his celestial lance, a spear of platinum light, and threw it at Tiamat's central head. She formed an elemental barrier in time, but the lance cracked it open. My clone reformed beside the Giantmu. Venom fruits rained in from the flanks. Bahamut pinned her from the front. I pinned her from the side. Tiamat finally understood the operation had failed. She cursed Bahamut, me, and aberrant dragons, then withdrew the divine power from Marith's body. The 5-headed saint form began collapsing as her divine thought fled upward in 5-colored light. But the Giantmu had already spread its canopy. Gold-green filaments stretched from the crown and wove into a giant net over Sunset Forest. The whole forest filled with abundance. Dretches still on the field mutated or burst apart. Abundant soldiers felt their wounds, fatigue, and even some rank bottlenecks loosen under the same power. I did not separate noble, soldier, kobold, or human. Under abundance, everyone on my side received the same gift, because I had never liked this world's habit of deciding worth by birth. The forest had become my sealed domain. Tiamat crashed into the light net and failed to break through. She changed direction and struck again. The net held. Her centuries of stored divine power were almost gone. What remained was only the fleeing divine thought. She screamed that I carried her blood and dared to trap my own mother. She swore she would watch from Barun Hell and wait for us to return to her path. Before she could finish, Bahamut raised his claw. 5 celestial lances formed at once and struck the 5-colored light. The sky flashed white. Tiamat's cursing stopped. Her saint clone was pulverized, and her divine thought shattered into unwilling echoes before fading between heaven and earth. A moment later, the sky cleared. Marith fell from the air. The 5 dead Abishai separated from his body like discarded shells. Their scales were dull, their vitality gone. Marith crashed into the battlefield and shrank back from nearly 15 meters to around 12. His scales turned gray-green. The madness and greed in his eyes vanished, leaving only confusion. His rank fell back to level 15. His bloodline was badly damaged. Without a major opportunity, he would never reach legend. And that was only if he lived. The Snake Man tribe was almost destroyed. The ancient tree fortress had collapsed under the Giantmu roots. Its draconic runes were extinguished, and the preserved head of the level 16 ogre warlord fell from the trunk and split apart on the ground. Everything Marith built had been destroyed by his own greed. Bahamut and I stood at the edge of the pit, looking down at him. I thanked Bahamut, Lord of the North Wind, for his help. Then I asked how he planned to deal with Marith. Bahamut did not answer at once. He looked at me and understood why I asked. I was testing whether he had come like Tiamat, or whether he truly meant to leave the war's result in my hands. He had come to punish Tiamat's rule-breaking, not to claim the result of my war. Marith's fate belonged to me. Kill him or spare him. Bahamut would not interfere. I accepted that. Then Bahamut asked me to take care of Orlia. She was the strongest gold dragon in the region, his loyal apostle, and she had risked her life to buy time for his descent. He also gave me a platinum dragon scale. The scale held enough divine power to block 3 legend tier attacks. Bahamut called it a greeting gift for a younger dragon he admired, and said that if I ever met metallic dragons in trouble, I could lend them a hand. Then he left one final promise. He would watch me from Celestia. Bahamut's divine power withdrew from Orlia, but he left a portion behind to help her break through. Her gold scales gained a faint white gold sheen. Her amber eyes kept tiny platinum flecks. Then she fell into deep sleep. Her life rank climbed from level 19 to level 20, the final threshold before Legend. There were 4 paths into Legend. Kill 10 rank 20 powerhouses and ignite one's fire with their life essence. Comprehend a rule from the world's origin, receive divine power from a demigod or deity at the cost of future limits, or conquer and integrate an extraordinary world into the main world. Aurelia now stood before that final choice, but not today. Today she slept. I wove a protective barrier of fine Jianmu vines around her, shielding her without disturbing the divine power inside her body. Then I returned to the edge of the pit. Marith still lay at the bottom, gray-green, broken, and barely breathing. Bahamut had left the decision to me. Now I had to decide how this debt would be paid. Marith lay at the bottom of the pit with half his scales gone, and his dragon blood mixed into the mud. Tiamat had torn his bloodline apart from the inside. Even if I left him alive, surviving 1 month in the wild would be difficult. Killing him outright would be simple. It would also be wasteful. I watched him for a while, then let the Jianmu clone at the pit edge dissolve back into the tree. My main body flew out from the trunk and landed in front of Maris. Then my core dependents arrived. Leora came first, covered in ash and blood. Illyra followed with her wings folded, her face calm but her grip tight on her bow. Var still had blood on his mouth. Brack and Sivrin rode in on direwolves, with Grick carrying an iron spear behind them. Oral walked at the rear with his sword. The battlefield around us had become broken earth. Black trenches, burnt wood, sulfur, blood, and corpses. Half-elves cleared arrows from the wall. Kobold auxiliaries searched bodies for usable weapons and armor. Ogres carried the dead toward the cremation pits. Leora looked me over first and asked if I was injured. When she saw I had mostly recovered, she finally breathed. Then Oral put Celera down. The former second-in-command of the Snake Man tribe collapsed into the mud. Her dragon blood had been ripped out by Tiamat. Her level 13 strength was ruined. Her eyes were dull, and she could barely lift her head. But when she saw Marith, she still forced out one request. She begged me to leave the Snake Man tribe a path to survive, even as slaves. Illyra slapped her across the face. The sound cut through the pit. Illyra asked where that mercy was when the Snake Men drove slaves into traps, whipped ogres and goblins into arrow rain, and spent lives they never valued. Celera did not defend herself. She only lowered her head again. She knew every word was true. I stopped Illyra and asked Celera one question. Why should I? Celera pointed weakly at Marith and gave her only bargaining chip. She knew where his real treasure trove was hidden. The ancient tree fortress only carried a small portion of his wealth. Before the expedition, Marith had hidden the main hoard somewhere else. Sivrin looked down at her and said what everyone knew. The defeated had no right to trade with treasure that already belonged to the victors. If they died, we could search the core area ourselves. Celera had no answer, but she still had value. She was the one person who could make the remaining snake men accept the new order without forcing us to kill every last one. So I gave my verdict. I would take the treasure. Celera and Marith, as the culprits who started the war, would die. Not cheaply and not cleanly. The remaining snake men would live as slaves. The dirtiest and hardest labor in abundance would fall to them. They would spend half their lifespan working off their debt before regaining freedom. Those with strength could choose a second path. Join the death camp, kill 10 enemies of equal or higher rank, and earn freedom that way. That was my final mercy. Celera collapsed completely, then began striking her forehead into the mud again and again, thanking me with the last strength in her body. I did not look at her for long. Her fate was decided. Marith's death still needed to become useful. I lifted Marith in one claw and Celera in the other, then flew toward the core area. Before leaving, I ordered Leora and the others to clean the battlefield, record post-war matters, and wait for rewards according to contribution. Snake Man prisoners and Allied Force matters were handed to Sivrin and Grick. I crossed the middle forest and saw the trail left by the Snake Man army's march. The deeper I flew, the denser the magic became. At the end of the forest, a huge lake appeared under the setting sun. On the island in its center stood the Snake Man tribe's buildings. This was the core area they had controlled for decades. The Snake Men left behind were relaxed at first. Their elites had marched out. Their dragon lord had marched out. They were waiting for victory news. They had even built a triumphal arch of obsidian and magic crystals near the road linking the island to the outer forest. Instead, they saw me above the island, carrying Marith and Selara in my claws. I circled long enough for everyone to understand. Their dragon lord had fallen. Their commander had fallen. Their army was gone. The strongest snake man left behind was only level 8. And even he looked as if the sky had collapsed. Selara looked down at the island she had ruled for years. She had climbed from ordinary warrior to dragon-blooded leader, commanded thousands, and stood below only Marith. Now all of it was finished. She gathered her last strength and shouted for the tribe to surrender. I was willing to give them a way to live, and putting down their weapons was the best result they could hope for. The island went silent, then the first weapon fell. More followed, soldiers and residents knelt one after another. But around 200 hardliners refused. They came from the ruling faction that had always wanted expansion and force. To them, Marith's fall was not proof that the tribe had lost. It was a chance to throw away caution and chase the old dream of a snake man empire. Selara closed her eyes. She knew these people would drag the remnants into extinction if they lived. I did not argue with them. The power of abundance had already entered the island's ley lines. Beside the island, Lake Water rose into a giant body. The water giant lifted one enormous palm and struck the open ground where the hardliners stood. When the water flowed back, only a huge palm-shaped pit remained. The island became completely silent. Every snake man pressed their face to the ground. I passed through the triumphal arch built for Marith's victory and dropped Marith and Selara before it. Selara asked 2 snake men to support her. With my permission, they carried her to Marith's side. She took a scimitar, cut flesh and dragon blood from the torn wound in his chest, and held it in both hands. Marith's hidden trove was sealed with his own blood and draconic runes. Using his flesh would open it cleanly. Selara led me deeper into the island. On the way, I saw barracks, forging tables, training grounds, and layered residential districts. The island was larger than any abundance settlement, even though most remaining snake men were elderly, weak women, and children. Selara also explained why they could not run. The snake men had once lived in the great southern swamp, until lizard men defeated them and drove them north. When they reached Sunset Forest, the old ogre tribe enslaved them for nearly 200 years. Only after Marith killed the ogre warlord did the snake men become masters of the core area. Now the south belonged to the lizard men. The west led through swamp toward elves who would never accept them. The north bordered the Jaya Duchy. The southeast touched the dwarven kingdom. Without Marith and the army, the snake men had nowhere safe to go. Staying under abundance was harsh. It was still a path. The gnolls had once walked a smaller version of it. Defeated, reduced to labor, then restored after years of work and battle merit. The snake men's crimes were heavier, so their price would be heavier too. At the hilltop, Selara stopped before an ordinary oak tree. She chanted the dragon language incantation she had heard when Marith sealed the horde. The dragon blood in her hands flashed, and hidden runes appeared inside the bark. The tree split open like a door. Behind it was a small spatial vault. Gold, silver, copper, gems, magic materials, and crystal ores filled the space. This was the wealth of 2 core area overlords. Centuries of ogre plunder and decades of snake man tribute, taxation, extortion, and raids. For the first time since hatching, I saw a true mountain of treasure. It was not only wealth. It was construction, expansion, soldiers, roads, walls, food, tools, and years of growth for abundance. Selara had given me the horde in exchange for her tribe's survival. Because she had been decisive, I would give her a better death. Marith would receive something else. I swallowed the entire treasure mountain into the storage space inside my stomach pouch, then returned to the triumphal arch. My body did not change size, but the snake men watched me with deeper fear. I stood before them and listed the tribe's crimes. For decades they had occupied the core area, oppressed surrounding tribes, driven out Bloodaxe, Greyskin, and Deep Furnace Keep, slaughtered weaker groups, forced tribute, and destroyed those who refused. They invaded abundance out of greed, caused heavy casualties, damaged the defense line, colluded with Tiamat, and brought Dretches and Abishai into Sunset Forest. Every charge was fact. No one defended it. Then I gave the formal sentence. All snake men became slaves from that day forward. They could regain freedom through half a lifespan of labor, or through the death camp by killing 10 enemies equal to or stronger than themselves. Marith, Selura, and all high-ranking Snake Man officers at rank 7 or above were sentenced to death. Vines burst from the ground and dragged the hidden high-ranking officers out of the kneeling crowd. Dozens struggled, but the tribe stepped away from them. My Jianmu clone returned from the battlefield, carrying the 5 Abishai corpses. Their scales, bones, magic circuits, and traces of Tiamat's divine power were too valuable to waste. The clone placed them beside Marith's. Then it dissolved and reformed into a new abundance Jianmu in front of the triumphal arch. The tree rose hundreds of meters tall, its canopy blocking the setting sun. Its roots pierced into the Snake Man Island and connected with the ley lines of Sunset Forest, which had already been saturated by my abundance after the war. Marith, the 5 Abishai corpses, and the dragged-out high-ranking snake men were swallowed by the roots and sealed inside the trunk. Their flesh and souls became the foundation. This Jianmu no longer needed me to constantly maintain it. It would draw from the forest's ley lines, stand as the core pivot of abundance's control over Sunset Forest, carry my power across the region, and sense enemy invasions or demonic beast movements through every branch and leaf. Marith's death would not end. He and the officers who served him would be bound and devoured forever. Selura did not receive that fate. After hearing the final verdict and seeing the tribe survive, she breathed her last in the mud. I let her keep that much dignity. The kneeling snake men looked up at the towering divine tree. They had seen their dragon lord, their leaders, and their officers swallowed into it. Terror filled them first, then something quieter followed. If they survived the sentence and their descendants entered abundance, this tree also meant stability. A stronger ruler had taken the core area, and the old nightmare around them was gone. I almost left for abundance. Then I stopped. Slave status and fear of the Jianmu were not enough. A defeated tribe needed a mark they could not escape. I connected with the new Jianmu, and countless tiny gold-green lights peeled from its leaves. They drifted toward every snake man kneeling before the arch. One snake man broke under the fear and ran for the lake. The moment he jumped in and tried to swim away, a whirlpool opened ahead of him. It pulled him under. A brief scream rose from the water, then only blood spread across the surface. After that, no one moved. The light spots entered the snake men one by one. The mark did not harm them. It even strengthened vitality and recovery a little. But if any marked snake man stepped outside the Jianmu's coverage, outside Sunset Forest, the power of abundance in their body would erupt and turn them into an abundance monstrosity. In this world, that fate was worse than death. The soul would be devoured by abundance, and the world itself would forget the one consumed. I ordered them to stay on the island and obey whoever came to take charge. Then I flew back to abundance. By then, the battlefield had mostly been cleaned. Usable weapons and armor were sorted onto flatbeds. Snake Man prisoners and surviving slaves from the vanguard had been moved into temporary camps under Knoll and Human Guard. The high-level meeting gathered in the newly built hall beneath Rock Hill, where the old Kobold Center once stood. The hall was made from ironwood, stone, and a vine-woven dome. A long vine table stood in the center. On one side sat Leora, Oral, and the main human commander. Opposite them sat Illyra, Sivrin, Brack, Var, and Grick. Leora knew Brack, Sivrin, Var, and Grick from years ago, but Illyra was new to her. Even so, both women carried my dragon blood, so they could set aside distrust long enough to discuss the war. Leora reported first. Of her 2,000 human infantry, more than 200 had died and over 100 were injured. The seriously wounded had been treated by half-elf healers, and most would recover combat ability soon. The knights suffered lighter losses, with 12 injured. Oral refused to be counted. Illyra read Sivrin's casualty report. Over 700 kobold swordsman shieldbearers died, and many of the elites Brack brought from the east were nearly wiped out. More than 600 Knoll hunters died. Half-elf losses were light, fewer than 20 dead. About half the ogres remained, and after years of labor in this battle, Illyra planned to ask me to restore their normal status. The 3 allied tribes also paid heavily. Grayskin goblins lost over 1,000, Bloodaxe lost over 600, and Deep Furnace Keep lost over 100 dwarves. For dwarves, that was a deep wound. Their population recovered far slower than goblins or gnolls. Because Doran had already pledged Deep Furnace Keep fully into abundance, the initial spoils gave the dwarves a larger share, including captured Snake Man forging equipment. But territory division had to wait for me. That decision would shape the future layout of the whole tribe, and no dependent would overstep it. Then my roar sounded above the hall. The nature pixies flew out to welcome me, and every soldier in abundance looked up. I had returned. Everyone in the hall stood and walked toward the door. When I flew back over abundance, the nature pixies reacted first. They streamed out from the cracks of the rock hall dome and circled my body like living light. The monsters guarding headquarters looked up next. Then the whole settlement began shouting my name in different racial tongues. The main army was still at the defense camp. Headquarters had grown, but it had started as a small kobold settlement, and it still could not hold several thousand soldiers at once. While descending, I cast the transformation spell I had learned during my slumber. For dragons, transforming was not a rare spell. The real point was control. A dragon's human form still reflected its draconic traits, and the cleaner the transformation, the more precise the dragon's power control. In a few breaths, I landed at the hall entrance in human form. I looked like the man I had been in my previous life. Medium build, black hair, ordinary enough at first glance. The difference was the pair of curved golden-green dragon horns on my head, scaled down to fit the body and wrapped in fine golden vine patterns. My robe came from the spell too, dark green with golden wheatear lines at the cuffs and collar. It looked like silk, but it was formed from my scales. Illyra, Brack, Sivrin, Var, Grick, and Leora all stopped at the entrance. Grick was the earliest one to follow me. He had watched me grow from a hatchling into the ruler of Sunset Forest, and now he could not even speak. Illyra stayed calmer, but even she recognized what the form meant. A dragon who could conceal most draconic features, this neatly usually needed to be close to adulthood, unless its talent and control were exceptional. I told them to stop standing outside and come in. My voice sounded like a young man in his early 20s now, crisp instead of heavy with dragon pressure. Leora froze when I passed her. Her reaction was not simple contract obedience. The master-servant contract only prevented betrayal and harm. It did not make her heart race every time she thought of me. The power of abundance had lived in her body for years. Its source was me. Whenever she healed others, she could sense that source like a distant lamp. Now, seeing me in human shape with dragon horns and a green robe, her face flushed before she could stop it. Oral saw everything. The old swordsman had lived nearly 200 years. He understood the look, remembered House Forest's nature elf bloodline, and quietly decided not to interfere. Families with dragon blood often produced stronger descendants, and a dragon who could force back Tiamat's saint clone was not a future to reject. Rowan Terran saw it too. He had pursued Leora for years. He brought her honey muffins, charged at the front in every battle, and arrived early to meetings just to speak with her longer. He had believed loyalty and patience might one day make her look at him differently. Now she looked at someone else that way. Rowan said nothing. He took half a step back, lowered his eyes, and crushed that hope before it could make him foolish. He still wanted to live. He still wanted power. He still wanted a future. Inside the hall, I sat at the head of the vine-woven long table and called everyone in. Illyra sat first on my left. Leora sat first on my right. Brack, Sivrin, Var, and Grick sat below Illyra. Oral sat below Leora. Rowan took the last seat. Before rewards, I set the contributions. First was Illyra. She had commanded almost the entire campaign from the front. The Slave Legion interception, javelin suppression, the duel with Celara, and troop rotation across the defense line. She had also pinned Celara long enough for the line to survive. Second was Leora. She brought 2,000 elite infantry at the critical moment, smashed 2 Snakeman phalanxes on the left wing, disrupted the enemy's rhythm, and brought Oral, dozens of high-ranking knights, human logistics, medical support, and supplies. Third were Brack, Sivrin, Var, and Grick. Brack and Sivrin opened the eastern battlefield, pinned part of the Snakeman Center, and filled the most dangerous gaps during the decisive stage. Brack held against Sarith and another general at the breach. Sivrin suppressed javelin throwers and advancing echelons with spells. Var's Knoll hunters handled the most dangerous reconnaissance, flank harassment, and casualty covering missions. Grick kept headquarters running while everyone else was at the front, handling logistics and prisoners without letting the rear fall apart. No one objected, so I gave the first reward to Illyra. The western region of Sunset Forest, from the half-elf settlement all the way to the border near the Elven Empire, would belong to the half-elves for free expansion. It would not be directly governed by headquarters. This land was preparation for the day I reached legend and led the half-elves back to their ancestral land. The hall went silent. Illyra had never asked for that promise again. The Elven Empire was one of the strongest powers on the continent, with at least 6 known legends and possibly demigod-level beings sleeping deeper inside. Reclaiming the half-elf ancestral land meant eventually facing that. She had planned to wait until abundance was strong enough. I put it on the table first. This was not a vague comfort. It was land, direction, and a future war goal. Alira knelt and thanked me on behalf of the half-elves, her voice shaking. I lifted her with mage hand and told her this was what she deserved. The half-elves were part of abundance, and their ancestral land was now abundance business. Then I turned to Leora. She knelt before me and I tapped her forehead. The master-servant contract broke. The soul-binding thread snapped inside her. I told her the contract was no longer needed. She had proven her loyalty. From that day forward, she was my kin and part of the abundance tribe. Then I placed my hand on her shoulder and poured in purer abundance. For 4 or 5 years, every use of her power had built backlash in her body, pulling her further away from ordinary humanity. I balanced it. Dragon blood became the foundation. Abundance became the meridians. The two stopped devouring each other and settled into order. When it ended, the hidden ginkgo leaf marks beneath her clothes and gloves faded. Her power did not weaken. It rose. Leora reached rank 14. Then I walked to the map formed from Jianmu feedback and marked out a territory near the forest earldom, about 1/10 of Sunset Forest. That land would belong to the Forest Earldom. Leora could govern it, develop it, and fief nobles inside it however she wished. Abundance would not interfere as long as she did not harm Abundance's interests. For House Forest, that was a permanent protected fief inside Sunset Forest, full of timber, minerals, demonic beasts, and strategic value. Leora understood the weight and accepted it quietly. Next came Brack, Sivrin, and Var. Each of them could choose an exclusive territory inside Sunset Forest. The scope would be selected later and reported to Alira for record. I also ordered rewards for Doran, Crag, and Nibek. Deep Furnace Keep, Bloodaxe, and Greyskin would each receive territory to rest and recover, sized according to contribution, with Sivrin handling the accounting. Then I looked at Grick. He had been with me from the beginning, but his dragon blood transformation had been delayed again and again. I walked to him and condensed a drop of golden-green dragon blood at my fingertip. This was late. Grick swallowed it. The transformation hit hard. His hunched kobold spine straightened. Golden-green scales broke across his back. 2 small horn buds rose from his forehead. In less than half a quarter hour, he grew to Brack and Sivrin's size. He became a half-dragon. He gained green dragon venom breath, abundance recovery, rank 10 strength, and a lifespan nearly 10 times longer than before. For Grick, that was not only power, it was youth returned. Then I looked to Oral and Rowans. They were not my kin and were not listed as Abundance members, but they had still fought. Oral had held 2 Abishai. Rowan had performed well in the flank charge. Their contributions could not simply be folded into Leora's reward. Oral stood first. He said he needed nothing and asked to transfer his reward to Leora. Leora almost objected, then understood. She had already gained more than enough. Freedom from the contract, backlash removal, rank 14, and a fief. If Oral moved his reward to her, the benefit still stayed inside House Forest. I saw the calculation. I did not expose it harshly. I plucked one of my dragon scales, shrank it to coin size, and flicked it to Oral. The moment he caught it, his depleted vitality eased. With that scale as a token, Oral became an important guest elder of the Abundance tribe. Except for the core region, he could travel freely through most of Sunset Forest. For an old swordsman, that pass was more useful than a pile of formal gifts. Then Rowan stood. He walked before me, knelt, and asked for dragon blood to undergo dragon pulse transformation. I did not agree immediately. I asked if he knew the result. He did. Swallowing dragon blood directly bestowed by a dragon would bind his soul to me like a master-servant contract. As long as I lived, he could never betray me. The choice was permanent. He still chose it. Rowan was nearly 30, stuck around rank 10, and knew his own talent might never carry him steadily into great master. In this world without strength, there was no right to speak and no right to choose. He would rather risk death in transformation than spend his life repeating the same ceiling. Leora stood and offered to exchange the territory I had given her for his chance. I looked at both of them and refused the premise. I was not asking because I was unwilling. I was asking because Dragon Pulse transformation could kill him. Dragon blood forcibly rebuilt the body. If will failed or rejection reaction became too violent, the process itself would take his life. Brack, Sivrin, Illyra, and Var had all survived it by crossing that line. Rowan did not hesitate. He feared mediocrity more than deaths. So I tried something new. I raised a small abundance giant mu projection from the hall floor. It was only taller than a person, but it connected through the ley lines to the main Giantmu on Snakeman Island. My own dragon blood was precious and tied directly to my strength. This time, I would not use it as the catalyst. The Giantmu's foundation held Marith's remaining dragon blood and the bloodline traces of the 5 Abishai. I had purified and restored those 5 chromatic dragon bloodlines through abundance, then used the Giantmu to nurture them. The drop Rowan would receive contained all 5 chromatic dragon bloodlines, harmonized by abundance, with green as the core. It was stronger, it was also riskier. If he survived, I could not promise everything, but reaching the level of an ordinary great master would not be a problem. The hall understood the weight of that. Oral was already a level 16 great master, and he had lived nearly 200 years. There were only a few dozen great master-level powerhouses in the surrounding region. For Rowan, this was worth gambling his life on. I cut the small Giantmu's bark with a dragon claw. A drop of golden-green blood oozed out, shining with faint 5-colored light. I held it before Rowan's. "Open your mouth." He did. The blood entered his throat, and the transformation began immediately. Pain scraped down his throat like burning sand. His stomach twisted, and he retched green glowing fluid onto the floor. His veins darkened, his bones rearranged. 2 hard lumps pushed out from his shoulder blades, moving under the skin with every crack. His breathing turned rough. Every inhale felt like poisonous mist. His organs corroded and rebuilt themselves again and again. Then the bloodline struck his mind. Green dragon whispers flooded him, tempting him to give up, to stop resisting, to let the forest swallow his will. His pupils flickered between human and dragon again and again. Rowan held on to one thought. He wanted power for himself. Not for Leora, not for his family, not for anyone watching, for himself. The transformation tortured him for most of the day. When he finally crawled up, he was no longer the same. A pair of complete dragon wings had grown from his back, dark green with fine golden patterns along the membranes, shaped like a green Abishai's wings. Emerald scales marked his arms and neck. His pupils had become green dragon pupils. His rank jumped from level 10 to level 12 and was still slowly rising. More importantly, he awakened a rare ability. He could freely switch between human form and pure green Abishai form. In that form, he would gain corrosive poisonous mist breath and physical strength far beyond his human body. The form consumed heavy stamina, but abundance could cover that cost. Rowan lowered his head, clenched his fists, and felt the new power running through him. Then he knelt before me and offered his loyalty. From that day on, another future powerhouse had taken his first step. After everyone in the hall received their rewards, I raised my wine glass and said it was time to reward the soldiers below. Then the entire hall shook. Weapons came up at once. Cups rattled on the long table. For 1 second, everyone thought another enemy had reached headquarters. Then the hall grew legs. 4 huge legs pushed out from the bottom of the building, lifted the whole structure off the ground, and began walking toward the army camp. Inside, nothing broke. The table stayed level. The wine only rippled. The hall moved like it had always been a vehicle and simply forgot to mention it. Everyone stared. They had seen me create treants and mud giants on the battlefield, but that was outside, in open terrain with visible abundance power. This was the meeting hall growing feet under their chairs. Grick touched the new horn buds on his head and wondered if abundance had always been this convenient. Var watched the bushes and stones being crushed under the hall's steps, and looked like every mountain road he had ever scouted had personally betrayed him. I only told them there was still much they did not know. Even I had not reached 1/10,000th of abundance's true height. One day, I would spread this power across the universe and ascend as a new deity. Not a deity like Tiamat's. My people did not treat that as empty boasting. In their world, legend was already distant. Demigods were something only powers like the Elven Empire could touch. Deities belonged in old codices and bard songs. But after watching Tiamat's saint clone fail to kill me, they could believe it. Oral touched the dragon scale in his robe and stayed silent. He had seen many ambitious people in nearly 200 years. None of them had ever aimed this high. The army camp saw the walking hall before they knew what it was. A half-elf sentinel spotted a huge building striding through the forest and sounded the alarm. Kobold shieldbearers formed up. Gnoll hunters grabbed spears. Half-elf archers drew bows. Ogres lifted boulders. Crag, Doran, and Nibek rushed out with their own troops. Then the sentinel noticed the nature pixies sitting on the dome, eating berries without a care, and a Lyra standing at the entrance waving. The alarm changed at once. It was not an enemy attack. The Dragon Lord had driven the hall over. The soldiers lowered their weapons in complete silence. The hall stopped before the camp, the doors opened, and I stood there in human form with a wine glass in hand. Illyra, Leora, Brack, Sivrin, Var, Grick, Oral, and Rowan stood behind me. I told everyone to return to their work and notify the kitchens. Tonight, extra meals. A few more venom pigs too. Grick and Rowan had just transformed, and transformed bodies needed food. The camp erupted. Soon the whole place turned into a victory feast. Kobold chefs brought out venom pigs raised over several years, now processed safely for everyone except me. Half-elves opened old fruit brew from their settlement and brought harps and flutes. Gnoll hunters added fresh horned deer and iron-skinned tusked pig to the fires. Dwarves used captured spices and rock salt to make heavy meat patties. Human wine and pastries filled the tables. Even the captured snake men received extra food. It was not equal to the warrior's meal, but for many of them, it was the first full meal since the battle. Inside the hall, the long table had been rearranged into a feast table. Half-elf leaders drank with kobold centurions. Dwarves argued over seasoning. Gnolls and kobolds competed over roasted meat. Ogres sat in the corners with whole deer legs. Rowan sat with the human knights, still adjusting to his changed body. After a few cups of fruit brew, he stepped into the open space outside and transformed into a green Abishai over 2 meters tall. Crag walked out to meet him. The two grappled under the bonfire light while the soldiers cheered hard enough to shake the camp. Neris and several half-elf rangers pulled Leora into a discussion about combining plant manipulation with abundance. They drew diagrams across the table, while nearby human knights understood absolutely none of it. Nibek sat beside Doran with half a cup of fruit brew and a cold meat patty, careful not to drink too much. The last time he lost control at a banquet, Crag had hung him from the camp flagpole for the night. Tonight, even he relaxed enough to finish the cup. Var sat quietly in a corner, gnawing on a deer leg. His eyes were clearer than anyone's despite the wine. Years ago, he had been a scout under another leader. He had never imagined he would sit at a banquet like this. He raised his bowl toward me from across the hall. I raised mine back. We drank at the same time. For a while, I only watched. A kobold miner and a human infantryman played drinking games at the same table. A gnoll hunter and a half-elf ranger sang together beside the fire. The ogres ate until the bones piled high. The dwarves kept debating rock salt like it was a military doctrine. This was what I wanted. Peace under my rule. Food, safety, noise, arguments that did not end in corpses. Since hatching, I had fought ogres, gnolls, snakemen, demons, and Tiamat Saint Clone. Every victory had been paid for with blood. But inside that fire-lit hall, my dependents, allies, and soldiers were smiling, because their lives had become a little better under me. For the first time, this world did not feel like a place I was passing through. It felt like home. Then the power of abundance inside me rose on its own. My life rank climbed from rank 13. The rank 14 threshold broke silently. Then rank 15 opened as well. I did not meditate. I did not enter a long sleep. I was sitting in a chair, holding wine, and eating roasted meat when I crossed 2 ranks. Crag, Doran, and Nibek nearly froze. Nibek spilled his second cup over his robe and forgot to wipe it. Ortal stared for a long time. Every dragon record he knew said growth should be slow, stable, and tied to high-energy matter plus long sleep. A dragon going from adolescent stage toward young dragon strength should take decades or more. I had gone from rank 13 to rank 15 in front of him during dinner. Either the old records were wrong, or I could no longer be measured by ordinary dragon rules. Crag stood with his wine bowl and pledged that Bloodex would follow wherever I pointed. Doran promised that deep furnace keeps hammers, forges, and strong liquor belong to me. Nibek followed, stammering but clear. Grayskin would remain a loyal ally of abundance. The feast went on. I discussed half-elf territory planning with Illyra, ore line development with Brack and Sivrin, and Grick's pigpen expansion problem between bites of roasted meat. When the campfires began to dim, I left the hall alone and stood outside in the night wind. Then I raised my cup toward the darkness. Several friends had come. They might as well come in for a drink. No one answered. Only leaves moved in the dark. I waited, then drank the cup dry. Since they refused to show themselves, I changed back into my true dragon form and rose into the night sky. The hidden visitors had come to observe abundance. Fine, I would let them see enough. Below legend, no one in Sunset Forest could kill me now. And if a legend wanted to try, they would first have to consider the platinum scale Bahamut had given me. I spread my wings. Golden-green light spots poured from between my scales and drifted outward like quiet rain. On Snake Man Island, the abundance giant Mu answered. Its leaves released their own light, and the two streams joined through the ley lines. The rain of abundance fell across all of Sunset Forest. It touched soldiers still drinking, warriors already asleep, and dependents scattered through the forest. A kobold centurion stopped mid-game as his scales brightened, and fine golden patterns appeared along the edges. A knoll hunter felt new tusks push under his lips, and his night vision sharpen. A half-elf gesturing during a battlefield story accidentally made a tree sprout where he pointed. Sleeping soldiers dreamed of golden wheat fields. From this moment, the members of the Abundance tribe could truly be called Abundance people. The change would not finish overnight. Each light spot was only a seed, but it raised their bodies, recovery, and growth potential by a tier, following each race's direction. Kobolds leaned further toward half-dragon bodies. Gnolls gained stronger senses, muscles, and tusks. Half-elves stabilized plant control until it moved closer to instinct. Ogres gained deeper resilience, with wounds that once needed days able to scab within hours. Almost everyone absorbed the light, but not everyone. Inside the rain, several places became dark zones. The light did not enter those bodies. It bent around them. 4 presences were especially clear. The moment they realized they had been exposed, they fled in 4 directions. Illyra, Leora, Brack, Sivrin, Var, Grick, Oral, Rowan, Crag, Doran, Nybek, and the other leaders came out behind me. Illyra spread her wings with bow ready. Leora held her staff. Rowan had already shifted into Abishai form, wings open and greatsword in hand. I spoke through the ley lines to all 4 directions. Since they were already here, why leave so quickly? 4 streams of abundance surged up from the ley lines and became 4 9-meter trees, each one thick as an ancient tree of war from the Elven Empire. The 4 hidden visitors stopped. To the north stood Galen of Jaya, the shield of the duchy, a level 19 shield warrior with ancient giant blood. His huge shield was already raised, alchemical marks glowing across it. One treant alone would not fright him. The problem was the green dragon behind that treant, glowing with power that even a level 19 warrior could feel. Worse, Galen recognized the source. 5 years ago, by the lava lake in Forest City, he had watched Leora hold up the flame fiend head and claim her title. He had represented the duchy's royal family and recognized her peerage and her right to trailblaze westward. Now he had been caught sneaking around her dragon lord's territory. Leora nearly dropped her staff when she saw him. Oral stood behind her, doing a very poor job of hiding his amusement. Galen planted his shield, turned around slowly, and pretended to study the grain patterns on the treant. To the east stood Borin Greycastle, leader of the Greycastle tribe. He wore a horned helmet, carried a giant warhammer, and had been sent by the legendary ancestor of the Greycastle family from the Dwarf Kingdom to investigate the divine power fluctuations. He had expected reconnaissance. Instead, abundance rain forced him out before he reached the core area. Then he saw Doran. Doran was his half-brother, the one who had led Deep Furnace dwarves away from Greycastle more than 100 years ago after refusing to submit. Borin had thought he died in Sunset Forest long ago. Doran's mug slipped from his hand. The 2 brothers stared at each other after a century apart, and neither spoke first. To the south stood Varrock Blackswamp, leader of the Blackswamp tribe. He was nearly 2.5 meters tall, covered in black scales, carrying a huge scimitar, and surrounded by the smell of decay. He looked at the treant, then at me, and simply spread his hands to show he had no malice. To the west stood Sarilyn, an elven ranger with golden hair, emerald eyes, twin scimitars, and a patterned elven longbow. She had been patrolling the Elven Empire's western border, quietly allowing several waves of fleeing half-elf slaves to escape as usual. Then her father, the guardian of the Empire's west, ordered her to investigate Sunset Forest. She came partly because of the order, and partly because she wanted to know what had happened to the half-elves living here. Now all 4 had been revealed. Their reasons were basically the same. The legendary powers behind the Jaya Duchy, Greycastle, the Great Southern Swamp, and the Elven Empire's western border had all sensed too brief, but terrifying divine power collisions in Sunset Forest. Those powers sent level 19 Great Masters to investigate, and the moment they entered my forest, abundance caught them. I looked at the four directions and understood what kind of guests the celebration had attracted. Four Great Masters, four factions, all exposed at once. The victory feast had just gained a much more complicated ending. I had four Great Masters caught in four directions, and somehow three of them were already connected to my people. Galen of Jaya's knew Leora and Oral. Borin Greycastle was Doran's half-brother. Saralyn was staring at Alira, like she had just found a secret the Elven Empire forgot to bury properly. Only Varrock Blackswamp stood there with both hands open, selling innocence with the face of a swamp warlord. So yes, the politics were already breathing. I folded my wings, landed, changed back into human form, and invited all four inside. They refused almost at the same time. Galen claimed he was only here under orders from the royal family to investigate Sunset Forest. Borin called it routine reconnaissance from Greycastle. Varrock took half a step back and said the swamp was going home. Saralyn bowed and said she had only been passing by. Passing by, at night, from four borders, right after two dragon gods punched reality inside my forest. I let that one sit for exactly one breath, then casually mentioned that Tiamat had descended a clone of a saint earlier, and that Bahamut and I had beaten it back together. Far beyond the hall, the words reached places no mortal wanted on their travel list. In hell, Tiamat's rage erupted through her divine realm. Devils near the five-colored dragon nest were burned to ash under divine might, and stronger devils in the distance wondered which aberrant dragon had made her lose face this time. On Mount Celestia, inside Bahamut's divine realm, great worm gold dragons heard their king laughing. Back in Sunset Forest, the four great masters went quiet. They knew what most common people did not. Tiamat and Bahamut might be ranked as lesser divine-grade deities on paper, but their real strength sat near chief god-level greater divine-grade existences. A clone of a saint from either of them started at legend at the minimum. And I had just said one came here, then failed. Galen's shield shifted another half-inch in front of him. Borin touched the rune token hidden on him. Varrock's lizard eyes tightened. Saralyn, as a true legendary descendant, understood even more clearly what surviving that kind of power meant. None of them said it aloud, but the same conclusion landed around the hall. Sunset Forest now belonged to abundance, and from this point on, every faction around it would treat my territory like an unspoken restricted zone. That was the first lock on the door. Then Leora walked out from behind me with the kind of noble smile that makes every political veteran check where the knives are. She greeted Galen, thanked him for recognizing her peerage back in Forest City, and invited him to let her repay that old care. Galen's expression turned miserable. He had excuses ready. He was passing by. He saw nothing. He had urgent business somewhere that was not here. Then he saw Oral behind Leora, enjoying this far too much, and the man knew escape had already been cancelled. At the same time, Doran came out from the hall entrance and looked at Borin. After a century apart, he smiled and called him brother. Borin's face went green. He did not come to reunite. He came to investigate divine power fluctuations. Instead, his runaway half-brother had appeared under a dragon lord's roof, holding emotional leverage with both hands. I looked from Leora and Galen to Doran and Borin, raised a cup, and invited everyone in again. This time Galen could not leave without insulting Leora's side of the relationship, and Borin could not leave without openly rejecting Doran. The two men hated it. Beautifully, diplomacy sometimes starts with family pressure and a hostage-level dinner invitation. Saralyn and Varrock tried to slip away while the others were trapped. So I brought out the real bait. I asked whether anyone was interested in jointly developing the large black oil deposit inside Sunset Forest. All four stopped. That single phrase had more weight than any speech I could give. Black oil-powered alchemical workshops, enchanted weapon catalysts, and large war machines. Proven deposits on the continent were rare, and the strongest factions already controlled almost all of them. Mine was on Snakeman Island. If news spread without structure, every neighboring power would come circling. So I offered the news myself in one room to all four sides, while I still controlled the timing. That was the point. I did not need to hoard every barrels. With abundance, ley lines, and enough time, resources were no longer my real ceiling. Stability was. If a black oil deposit could buy recognition, trade, craftsmen, border access, and breathing room, then the oil was not treasure. It was bait with paperwork. I led everyone into the halls. Galen deliberately fell behind and pulled Oral into the shadows near the entrance. He asked when House Forest had gotten involved with this side. Oral tried the drunk old man act first. He claimed he knew nothing and did not care about family affairs. Galen did not buy a word of it. House Forest had survived for a millennium beside the Jaya ruling family. For 200 years, Oral's shadow had been behind almost every major succession and crisis. When the Forest earldom declined after civil strife, other nobles had not carved it apart because everyone knew one thing. As long as Oral was alive, House Forest was not helpless. Then Oral dropped the act. He told Galen to follow the Dragon Lord's intentions because it would benefit him, House Forest, and the Jaya Duchy. And if Jaya opposed me, House Forest would immediately withdraw from the duchy. Friendship could last 1,000 years. Some choices still left no room for compromise. Galen froze. That threat hit harder than the Treants. House Forest had stood with Jaya through the duchy's worst crises and never backed away. Now Oral was willing to break a millennium of alliance over me. That meant this was no longer a talk with a new monster overlord in Sunset Forest. This was a diplomatic contact that could reshape Jaya's eastern border for centuries. The other three great masters had their own ways to overhear the whisper. Their moods sank at the same time. Everyone present knew House Forest, a family that had produced great master-level powerhouses without a generational gap for 1,000 years, did not gamble its foundation on a pretty face and a lucky harvest. If Oral was that firm, then abundance was deeper than it looked. And I heard all of it. The hall had been grown from Jianmu roots. Inside the abundance Jianmu's range, tiny disturbances did not hide from me. Oral had taken the guest elder scale I gave him and turned it into a hammer against four great masters' minds. Old Fox, annoyingly useful Old Fox. Once everyone sat down, I opened the real negotiation. Abundance would keep 60% of the black oil deposit. The remaining 40% could be shared among the four sides. I made it clear I was not lacking resources, and I was willing to use black oil to make friends. The room immediately tightened. A dragon offering profit always makes people suspicious. Fair? We do have a reputation problem. And by reputation problem, I mean the entire species has been yelling mine at shiny objects since history learned to write. Galen spoke first for the Jaya Duchy. Jaya did not need ownership of the deposit. It wanted long-term priority procurement for border defense, alchemical workshop energy reserves, and war machine cores. In exchange, Jaya could open 3 eastern border trade routes and issue official transit permits for abundance caravans, though not into the duchy's deep hinterland. I countered with exact terms. Priority procurement at 20% below market price. 3,000 barrels of alchemical fuel per year. 1,000 sets of enchanted catalysts per year. In return, Jaya would open the 3 routes, issue the permits, and officially mark Sunset Forest on its map as Abundance Tribe jurisdiction. That last phrase was the real blade. Recognition, not just there are monsters there, not temporary occupied forest, jurisdiction. Galen could not grant it alone. He said that decision had to go to Grand Duke Jaya and the Senate. But trade routes and permits could begin under his authority. I accepted that. Within 3 months, I would wait for Jaya's reply. Before then, the procurement agreement could start. One side down. Boren spoke next because sitting across from Doran was clearly grinding his nerves. Greycastle needed black oil for furnaces and forging. In exchange, they could offer weapons and forging technology. He placed a dwarven rune token on the table and explained that his legendary ancestor had authorized him to make contact with Sunset Forest. I gave him a clean contract. Greycastle would send 100 craftsmen to help Abundance build a complete weapon forging workshop for 10 years. After that, both sides could decide whether to renew. In exchange, Greycastle would receive 1,500 barrels of high-purity alchemical fuel each year at 20% below market price. On top of that, we would jointly build a small refining station on the border between Sunset Forest and the Greycastle Mountains. Abundance would provide the technology. Greycastle would provide manpower and stone. Output would split 60-40, with 60 going to Abundance and 40 to Greycastle. Boren liked it. Dwarves respect clear prices. No perfumes, no poetry, no noble fog machine. Just terms, labor, material, output. He slapped the table, which in dwarven style meant the deal was made. 100 craftsmen would arrive within 3 months, and Greycastle would send people to coordinate the refining station site. 2 sides down, then everyone looked at Varrock Blackswamp. He did not rush. When I asked what the Great Swamp needed, He said the Black Swamp tribe did not lack warriors or scimitars, and it did not truly need black oil. The swamp needed stable supplies. Metal, medicine, salt, prey in the swamp was becoming scarce, and Black Swamp was the largest tribe there. That answer was honest in the most dangerous way. He was not chasing fancy fuel. He was naming survival logistics. I offered designated trade routes through Sunset Forest. Abundance would collect tax on the supplies, but the total tax would not exceed 1/30th. For the Black Swamp tribe, that meant metal, medicine, and salt without pretending loyalty. For me, it meant the southern swamp had a reason to stay stable on the surface. Varrock raised his cup and said Black Swamp could consider it. I did not mistake that for friendship. Surface stability was enough for the first round. 3 sides down, Saralyn was last. She said her need for black oil was personal and financial. Most of the Western Territories' taxes had to be handed to the Central Elven Empire, and the rest barely covered border defense and daily operations. She had loosened policies toward half-elves under her authority, but helping them required money. So her demand was simple: stable black oil procurement at a reasonable price. In exchange, the Western Territory could maintain limited border trade with Sunset Forest at designated points on the western border of the Elven Empire. No access to the Empire's hinterland. Then she addressed the half-elves. If half-elves in her Western Territory voluntarily migrated to Sunset Forest, she would not stop them. But they had to choose it themselves. She would not organize migration, mobilize territory resources, or publicly support anything that looked like population loss from Imperial land. That was her bottom line as an Elven Empire lord. I accepted the line. Saralyn would receive 1,500 barrels of alchemical fuel per year at 20% below market price. Sunset Forest caravans could trade at the designated western border points, limited to alchemical products and forest specialties, with weapons and military supplies excluded. For half-elf migration, the rule was voluntary. Sunset Forest could spread news through unofficial channels. Those who wanted to come could come by themselves. Abundance would not incite, organize, or make Saralyn's position difficult. She raised her cup. Deal? After that, I stood and raised mine to all 4 guests. Tonight was only the beginning. The next formal meeting would be in 3 months. By then, their decision-making layers could give new instructions, and we would discuss specific terms properly. But after this cup, Sunset Forest and the 4 surrounding forces at least had a foundation to sit down and talk. Galen stood first. He had not secured recognition yet, but he had trade routes, procurement rights, and 3 months to carry Oral's warning back to the Grand Duke and Senate. Borin raised his cup without looking at Doran. Varrock lifted his cup slowly, his scimitar still within arm's reach. Saralyn raised hers last, calm and quiet, glancing once toward Alira. Alira did not answer the look. Her hand stayed near her bow. In the corner, Oral sat with his wine barrel and watched all 4 faces. 4 cups, 4 thoughts, and 3 months for every power around Sunset Forest to recalculate what abundance was worth. Commitments can be stronger than fine gold when interest supports them, and thinner than glass when interest shifts. I knew that, Oral knew that, everyone at that table knew that. But for one night, nobody walked out swinging. For a young tribe surrounded by old powers, that counted as a victory. Oralia was being guided by nature sprites over Abundance Island, still shaken by the sight of the Abundance Giantmu. As she flew closer to the coast, she noticed new high platforms around the island. At first, they looked like watchtowers. They were not watchtowers. Mounted on them were living ballistas, each about 1.5 people tall, wider than 2 people with arms spread. Their arms carried golden-green patterns like Giantmu bark, and dark green vines ran from their bodies into the ground, feeding on the ley lines like roots drinking water. Oralia slowed down and inspected one. It had engraved scales for different attack modes. A sealed pod in its lower body grew thorn ammunition. A closed launch slot at the front still held traces of concentrated power of abundance. Spare rootlets waited under the soil like dormant traps. Then she looked across the coast. Every high platform had these weapons. Each direction had at least 2 covering each other. From what she could see, the coast alone had no fewer than a dozen, and with the ones near the island's highest point, Abundance Island held no fewer than 30. All of them were connected to the Jianmu ley line network. As long as Jianmu lived and the ley lines flowed, they had ammunition. If damaged, they could repair through abundance instead of needing normal replacement parts. 30 living firepower points formed a crossfire network over the air and the lake. This was my new defense weapon, the Abundance Gigi. The first attack mode was Thorn Arrow. Jianmu supplied the energy, and the range reached several hundred steps. The Thorn Sack generated ammunition, and every hit carried abundant spores that sprouted briars inside the wound, tearing tissue and causing constant bleeding and pain. In rapid-fire mode, one ballista could pour several shots per second and stop a row of charging infantry fast. The second mode was Exploding Fruit. The weapon condensed high-concentration power of abundance into a fist-sized dark green fruit covered in glowing golden cracks, then launched it in an arc. It could pass over walls and bunkers before shattering. Every fragment carried spores, and the impact area became a briar zone where barbed vines tangled everything inside. The third mode was Rootlets. After a short charge, Jianmu roots burst from the ground and extended several hundred steps. The first target hit would be dragged down and bound, while the rest of the roots created a small entanglement zone for nearby enemies. Long-range bombardment, mid-range briar blockade, close-range root binding. That was the island's three-layer defense system. I had designed the first batch so Abundance could defend Sunset Forest even when I did not personally move. Jianmu grew the main bodies. Dwarf blacksmiths calibrated the growth rings and launch slots. Half-elf mages connected the energy vines to the ley line network. 30 units were deployed in only a few days. 8 sat at the highest point around the Abundance Jianmu, facing 4 directions as the long-range strike core. 16 covered the coastline from high platforms, 2 per position so one could fire while the other cooled or repaired. 6 more guarded the land connections where frontal assaults were most likely. Together, they wrapped Abundance Island in layered fire from hilltop to shore. Aurelia was a level 20 adult gold dragon. Hunting a dragon like her usually required a full dragon hunting team of the same rank with elite equipment, and even she understood that attacking this island head-on from the lake would be exhausting. Not impossible, but ugly, very ugly. She looked at the nature sprite balancing on her claw, then looked toward the golden-green dragon shadow deep in the Jianmu canopy. And she made the wise decision not to bring up the stone tablet yet, not before speaking to me face-to-face. Because whatever Abundance Island had been before, it was now a fortress that grew its own weapons. By dawn, the 4 great masters finally left my hall. Galen went north, Borin went east, Varrock returned south, Sarilyn moved west. 4 directions, 4 promises, and all of them carrying enough suspicion to season the whole forest. I stood at the camp entrance with Alira, Leora, Brack, Sivrin, Var, Grick, Crag, Doran, Nybek, Rowan, and Oral behind me. The moment the guests disappeared, Brack could not hold it anymore. He asked why we let them go. From his view, we had trapped 4 upper-level representatives from the surrounding forces inside our home ground. If we captured them, the north, east, south, and west would all lose key figures at once. Sivrin added the military angle. The main armies of Jaya, Greycastle, and Black Swamp were scattered, and the next half-month was the best window before they could gather troops. Var agreed, Grick agreed, Crag said the Bloodaxe Gnolls could still fight. For about 3 seconds, my leadership council turned into a war room with no breaks. I stopped them. Nearly half of the tribe's elites had died in the Snake Man War. Kobold shield bearers, Gnoll hunters, half-elves, ogres, dwarves, and goblins had all paid in blood. Morale was high, yes, but morale does not replace dead veterans. If we expanded now, we would be stretching wounded troops across new land before the graves were cold. And even if I defeated the 4 great masters, the legends behind them would move. That was the part nobody wanted to say too loudly. Winning one battle did not mean Sunset Forest could eat every border at once. The tribe needed recovery, new recruits, healed injuries, and time for abundance to finish changing our people from the inside. The black oil field was not a loss. It was the price of peace. Once those 4 returned, their factions would start calculating shares, routes, quotas, and advantages. No one would want the others to profit first, and no one would want to be the first idiot to attack abundance and ruin the deal for everyone. That tension bought me a window, and what I lacked most was time. If I reached legend, Abundance would no longer be a strange forest tribe trying to survive between old powers. It would become a force the world had to name properly. After that, the sky and earth would be wide. Brack and the others still looked unwilling, but they understood. One by one, they left to recover, train, and reorganize. Oral leaned against a pillar with his wine barrel and raised it toward me. I nodded back. The cards were played. Now the forest had to wait. Cut north to Galen. By noon, he had left Sunset Forest and reached a border outpost on the Jaya Duchy's eastern trade route. Oral's warning kept echoing in his head. House Forest would withdraw from Jaya if the duchy opposed me. That sentence was heavier than every trade term from the banquet. Galen dismissed his attendants, took out a palm-sized communication crystal, and contacted Lord Cedron of the Holy Light Kingdom, a level 21 legendary holy warrior assigned to oversee Jaya affairs. Then Galen lied, respectfully, smoothly, with the posture of a loyal vassal. He reported that there was no real abnormality in Sunset Forest, only a regional magical fluctuation, probably from a demonic beast deep in the forest breaking through to Great Master rank. He assured Cedron that Jaya would continue guarding the southern border of the Holy Light Kingdom. Cedron ordered him to maintain surveillance, then ended the call. Only after the crystal went dark did Galen wipe the sweat from his forehead. Jaya was a vassal state of the Holy Light Kingdom. Galen served Jaya, but the kingdom above Jaya was the hand around its neck. If the Holy Light Kingdom learned about the black oil deal too soon, it would use the agreement as an excuse to interfere in Sunset Forest. Jaya's share was too valuable to surrender. 10% of a large black oil deposit, plus 3,000 barrels of alchemical fuel and 1,000 sets of enchanted catalysts every year at 20% below market price, could help Jaya form another ace legion or support another great master without increasing military spending. That meant Jaya could stop living only as a passive border shield. So Galen needed the Grand Duke and Senate aligned before the Holy Light Kingdom's spies reacted. It would take 10 days by fast horse to reach the capital. Before convening the Senate, he planned to purge the spies under the excuse of investigating remnants of the Abyss cult. After the Flame Fiend disaster, that excuse was painfully believable. For once, the old shield was not preparing for a battlefield. He was preparing for a capital purge. Cut east to Borin. He returned to an outer stronghold in the Greycastle Mountains, dismissed the dwarf warriors, and entered a secret chamber deep in the mine. There, he placed his rune token on a stone platform and activated it with battle chi. A phantom appeared above the token, a dwarf ancestor in absurdly heavy mithril armor, his helmet set with a fist-sized lava core. Borin knelt and reported everything. A level 15 green dragon aberrant dragon in Sunset Forest. Strength far beyond rank. Tiamat's clone of a saint rooted after Bahamut joined the conflict. The Snake Man tribe annexed. Abundance now covering the whole forest. Then he reported the deal. Greycastle would send 100 craftsmen for 10 years, to help Abundance build a full weapon forging workshop. In return, Greycastle would receive 1/10 of the black oil profits, 1,500 barrels of high-purity alchemical fuel each year at 20% below market price, and a joint refining station on the border. Abundance would provide the technology. Greycastle would provide manpower and stone. Products would split 60-40, with 60 for Abundance and 40 for Greycastle. The ancestor asked one question: did the green dragon show malice toward Greycastle? Borin said no, at least not for now. The offer was cleaner than anything human nobles usually put on a table. That honesty mattered. The ancestor judged that a dragon sharing wealth had to be planning something large, because normal dragons did not donate profit to neighbors out of emotional warmth. Still, the contact was worth continuing. 3 months later, Borin would personally escort the craftsmen to Sunset Forest. After every future contact, he would report through the rune token so the ancestor could track each step of this aberrant green dragon. Borin accepted the order. Then he began selecting the craftsmen. He wanted strong workers for the contract, partly because dwarves did not default, and partly because if the craftsman handled things well, maybe he would not have to argue with Doran for too long next time. That was not diplomacy, that was sibling damage control with a beard. Cut west to Cerilyn. She did not rush home through the center of Sunset Forest. She moved along the western edge near the half-elf territory, and stayed hidden in the canopy. Below her, the half-elves were building their new home. No, growing it. Half-elf mages guided magic into the soil, and vines rose into house frames. Craftsmen nailed ironwood boards onto the living skeletons. Women wove baskets beneath the trees while humming the same forest ballad from the banquet. Children ran through the clearing, and one little half-elf tripped over a vine, stood up muddy, and kept laughing. Saralyn had seen too many half-elves in the Elven Empire. Plantations, slave markets, roadside crosses after failed escapes. Their eyes had been hollow. The ones here were not. A craftsman complained that a mage had grown the vines crooked. The mage told him to do it himself if he was so skilled. Both of them laughed. Saralyn remembered something her father, the guardian of the Empire's West, had once said at dinner. Bloodline did not make nobility, and power did not make nobility. The one who let their people live with dignity deserved that word. In the Elven Empire, saying that in public would be political poison. Here, watching half-elves laugh while building homes that belonged to them, she finally understood it. Her promise from the banquet had been a diplomatic clause. Now it had weight. She could not openly support migration from imperial territory. She could not organize it, fund it, or put her seal on it. But patrol routes could become less strict. Certain border paths could become safer at certain times. Some escapees who should have been intercepted could simply not be seen. That was the most help she could give without destroying her own position. In the clearing, Neris directed a newly enlightened Treant to move boulders away from the construction area. Years of growth and abundance had awakened his spell talent, raising him to level 9 as a half-elf mage skilled at summoning treants for control. Then he stopped. He looked straight toward the ancient tree where Saralyn had been hiding. There was nothing visible. An older half-elf warrior asked what was wrong. Neris said it was probably nothing, but even after turning away, he looked back once more. By then, Saralyn had already left. Cut south to Varrock. He returned to the Great Swamp by nightfall, moving faster once the damp rot replaced forest air. Deep in the swamp, he reached the Black Swamp Pool, where the water was black as solid ink and gray-black mist carried compressed magic. Varrock planted his scimitar in the mud, knelt on one knee and bowed his head. Under the pool, ancient eyes opened. The water shook like it was boiling. Dragons might rose from below, heavy enough to crush most creatures beneath legend. Then a huge black dragon head emerged, scales slick with swamp water, horns swept back and scarred from centuries of battle. The scar across his face ran from above one eye, over his nose, to the corner of his mouth. This was Black Dragon Khazareth Mornskill, the true master of the Great Swamp. He was over 25 meters long, a level 23 legendary mage dragon, and after centuries of sleep, he was awake. Khazareth asked why the two dragon gods had descended over Sunset Forest. Varrock reported everything clearly. A green dragon named Varen had drawn Tiamat's clone of a saint and Bahamut's apostle into the same conflict. Tiamat lost. The Snake Man tribe was annexed. Abundance now covered Sunset Forest, commanded many races, and had soldiers with recovery comparable to ogres, though their numbers were still limited. Khazareth listened most closely to my role in the clash. A dragon below Great Master rank had stood beside Bahamut against Tiamat's Saint clone and survived. That was not normal. Then he asked what I had promised Black Swamp. Varrock answered, trade privileges for ironware, medicine, and salt, with taxes no higher than 1/30th, and exact terms to be discussed at the five-party meeting 3 months later. Khazareth fell silent. A dragon sharing wealth and trade rights was wrong by dragon standards. Painfully wrong. The only answer that made sense was aberrant dragon, and if both dragon gods had descended for me, then that answer fit too well. Then Khazareth spoke about his own past. At his peak, his army was claimed to be 1 million strong, though the core force numbered only tens of thousands. He had conquered the Great Swamp and made every tribe there hear his name. Then the Holy Light Kingdom, the Elven Empire, and the Dwarf Kingdom joined forces against him. 6 legendaries, hundreds of thousands of troops. Khazareth faced 2 legendaries head-on, killed one, and severely wounded another. But the remaining 4 struck from the flanks and broke his army. His tail was broken, half his wing was snapped. He fled into the swamp with only a few thousand followers, while enemies hunted him for 3 months. He survived, but his army was gone, his territory was carved into 3 parts, and most tribes that followed him died. The Black Swamp tribe descended from his loyal lizard men and held the pool for centuries under his last order. Guard this place and wait for him to wake. The Deep Swamp tribe was made of swamp trolls and lizard men who betrayed him, and defected to the Elven Empire. The Grey Stone tribe was made of duergar and lizardmen who surrendered to the Dwarf Kingdom. Now Khazareth had recovered after more than 200 years, but he had not rushed to retake the swamp. If three powers had joined once, they could join again. He looked toward Sunset Forest and saw another possibility. Maybe I could break the old dragon cycle. Expand, make enemies, get surrounded, lose everything. Before Varrock returned for the next meeting, Khazareth would personally visit Sunset Forest. After that, he would decide Black Swamp's attitude toward me. Varrock was surprised, but he obeyed. The black water closed over Khazareth again. The pool went silent, but Varrock knew his lord had truly woken. Meanwhile, in the eastern Great Swamp, the Deep Swamp tribe stirred. Their leader, Thurgan, a massive deep swamp troll berserker over 3 meters tall, was eating in his lodge when his deputy Maruk rushed in. Maruk was a level 16 lizardman warlock, one of the modified lizardmen under the tribe's command, and he reported that Varrock had gone to Sunset Forest, then entered the forbidden Black Swamp area after returning. Maruk called the Black Swamp lizardmen traitors. That was what he believed. The Elven Empire had captured and magically modified his lineage generations ago. Talented lizardmen with status and memory of identity had been personally brainwashed by legendary soul mages. To them, loyalty to the elves was original truth, and Black Swamp were rebels. Thurgan knew better. The Deep Swamp trolls had once been low slaves under Khazareth. After the three powers defeated the Black Dragon, Thurgan's father had betrayed him first, handed the eastern armories and granaries to the Elven Empire, and earned Deep Swamp its current position. That betrayal bought them 1/3 of the Great Swamp, tens of thousands of lizardmen to command, and yearly border subsidies from the Empire. But he did not say that to Maruk. He only ordered doubled patrols and constant watch on Black Swamp. When Maruk left, Thurgan took out the emergency communication crystal from the Elven Empire and reported Varrock's movements. The Empire told him to maintain surveillance while it evaluated the situation. Thurgan ended the call uneasy. He could not explain it, but Varrock entering that forbidden zone after 2 quiet centuries felt wrong. So he went back to eating, because apparently denial is also a management style. At the same time, in the southern Great Swamp, the Grey Stone tribe received the same alarm. Their camp stood on rocky hills near the Dwarf Kingdom border. Their leader, Durnek, a level 18 duergar admiral in ruined heavy armor, was studying mineral maps when his deputy Velrak, another level 16 lizardman warlock, rushed in with news of Varrock and the Forbidden Zone. The Grey Stone story mirrored Deep Swamp. The duergar had been mine laborers under Khazareth. After his defeat, Durnek's father defected to the Dwarf Kingdom and traded swamp mineral maps for trust, protection, and control over another third of the Great Swamp. Their lizardmen were also taught that they had always served the Dwarf Kingdom, and that Black Swamp were the traitors. Durnek ordered tighter patrols, then sent his own report to the dwarven side. By the end of the day, one visit to Sunset Forest had shaken more than 4 factions. Jaya was preparing a purge. Greycastle was preparing craftsmen. Saralyn was preparing quiet escape routes. Black Swamp's ancient dragon had opened his eyes, and the 2 puppet tribes that helped split the Great Swamp were now warning their masters that the old Forbidden Zone might not stay silent much longer. All I wanted was time. Instead, Black Oil had started moving history. Deep under the Black Swamp, Khazareth Mornskill tried to sleep again. He was waiting for Varrock's next report from Sunset Forest, and after losing everything once, he had no intention of acting before he understood me properly. A dragon can survive one disastrous overreach. The second one is usually called archaeology. Then a voice entered his mind. No warning, no breach in the barriers around the swamp. Just a soft, flattering whisper telling him how ironic it was that a dragon with world-shaking power had to curl up in mud. How he was meant for greatness. How he deserved to stand above mortals and common crawlers. Khazareth's eyes opened. Layer after layer of mental defense unfolded inside his consciousness, each strong enough to block ordinary legendary-grade mental attacks. The voice still remained, and worse, every word sounded perfectly aimed at the bitterness he had carried for centuries. His conquest of the Great Swamp, his million-strong legend, his defeat right after reaching the peak, the enemies who saw him only as an evil dragon to suppress. The voice understood too much. That was the problem. It was too precise. Khazareth caught the trace of divine power hiding inside it, bright as a lamp in the dark. Tiamat, the five-colored dragon mother, had come whispering into his head. Khazreth erupted. Legendary power shook the black swamp as his 25-meter body rose from the ink-black water, throwing a shadow across the mud. He roared into the void and ordered Tiamat out of his mind. The bewitching divine power tore apart. This was not some frightened young dragon hearing a divine sales pitch for the first time. This was a level 23 legendary black dragon mage, in a lair he had built and reinforced for 800 years. If the old allied legends ever wanted to kill him inside that nest, they would have to pay with more than half their number. Tiamat opened her eyes in her divine kingdom. Another failure. First, I had rejected her and helped Bahamut rout her saint clone. Now Khazreth would not even sit through the opening paragraph of the pitch. Still, she needed him, or at least she needed him as pressure against me. I was growing too quickly in Sunset Forest, and if I peacefully passed my development stage, even Tiamat herself might struggle to catch me once I reached legend. So she tried again, this time calling it a deal. Khazreth answered with one word. Scram. That was not rude diplomacy. That was ancient dragon survival advice. The dragon clan's legacy had warned generation after generation that talking to Tiamat was already losing. The safest response was no conversation at all. Khazreth crushed the remaining divine power out of his mind, then went still. Now he was certain I was an aberrant dragon's, and not an ordinary one's. If Tiamat feared me enough to risk whispering to him personally, then the weight of Sunset Forest had just changed again. Khazreth decided Varrock's future message would not be enough. Next time, he would personally visit Sunset Forest and meet me face to face. While Tiamat was failing in the swamp, I was standing at the top of the Abundance Giantmu, looking over the island below. The Snake Man buildings had been cleared away. Nature sprites had built nests on half-dismantled watchtowers. The triumphal arch still stood at the island entrance, but this place could not remain a captured Snake Man base. It was time to move the heart of the tribe. I spread the power of abundance through the ley lines toward Rock Hill, the stone layer where I had first coiled after hatching. Then I lifted it. Rock Hill, the Grand Hall, and the structures built on it were raised by countless vines and carried from the edge of Sunset Forest into the core area. The hall stayed intact. Nature sprites sleeping on the dome woke in panic, circled it, and clearly had one shared question. Why did home just start traveling? The move took several hours. When Rock Hill finally settled in the center of the island, the whole island trembled. From that moment, the island became the new core of the Abundance tribe. The Snake Man captives were dealt with next. Most were divided into squads and sent across Sunset Forest for atonement labor. Mines, farms, filthy work, exhausting work. The same path the ogres had once walked. The ogres, after years of hard labor and their contribution in the war, were granted amnesty. The Snake Men had no such credit yet. They had ruled the core area not long ago. Now they marched out under kobold overseers, heads lowered, toward the lowest place in the forest's order. No one resisted, no one fled. Their strength to do either had already been stripped away. But I did not send all of them away. I kept roughly 1,800 Snake Men on Abundance Island. 800 were the captured Snake Man javelin throwers. At their peak, the entire Snake Man tribe had only 800 of these elite ranged soldiers. And during the war, even from the rear, they had caused serious trouble for us. The remaining 1,000+ were young, able-bodied Snake Men screened through the power of abundance. They had higher affinity, stronger bodies, and the greatest remaining capacity for resistance, which meant they stayed closest to me. If another major war came, they would be the first cannon fodder sent forward. Harsh, yes, also very clear. Alongside them, I stationed 800 kobold sword and shield warriors, 400 Knoll hunters, and 200 half-elf mages and rangers. All of them had been screened by abundance and chosen as the highest talent elites of their races. This became my direct elite force, the Abundance Legion. They were not famous yet, but every soldier had received at least one proper enhancement from abundance. Recovery, strength, and reaction speed had all moved beyond ordinary kin. In the next real battle, enemies would learn the name the hard way. I carved the island's new name into the triumphal arch in dragonic runes. Abundance Island, whatever it had been called before, no longer mattered. The Snake Man tribe's era was over. Marith's name was buried with it. Their barracks became Abundance Legion Barracks, and their forge tables were recalibrated by dwarf craftsmen for standard Legion equipment. The nature sprites flew around the island like they were celebrating a rebirth. I rested inside the top of the Abundance Gianmu, not asleep but listening. The ley lines carried information from every part of Sunset Forest back to me. Camps, farms, patrols, new construction, injured warriors recovering, resources moving. For the first time, the forest was not just territory I owned. It was a body I could feel. Then Leora came to Abundance Island. She crossed the land bridge with Rowan Taryn, Cadden, and several knights, moving through the Legion camp under construction. The snake men lowered their heads when they saw her, because many of them remembered exactly who had broken their left flank. The other races stopped work and showed respect. Leora had earned that. Under the Abundance Gianmu, she dismissed her escorts and told me she had come to say farewell. She had been away from the forest earldom for nearly a month, and even with others managing routine affairs, the Count had decisions only she could make. She would lead most of the human infantry and knights back the next morning. But she had two arrangements. First, she wanted to leave the entire half-caveman chef team in Sunset Forest. And honestly, this might have been the most immediately popular reform in tribal history. Our meat was good, our ingredients were rare, our cooking method was mostly add salt and believe. The half-caveman master chefs had watched the kobolds cook during the feast with the expression of professionals witnessing a crime scene. They were willing to stay and train proper chefs. I accepted. Quality of life matters. A tribe cannot survive on victory speeches and salted meat forever. Second, Leora wanted to develop the territory I had allocated to her instead of wasting it on a few outposts. She would leave Rowan in Sunset Forest with 200 direct human infantry. As Count of the Forest, she would appoint him as a viscount and establish a governor-general's office on that land. Rowan would handle daily affairs and early development, while Leora sent craftsmen, farmers, and merchants in batches after returning home. The goal was not only land development, it was contact. Humans and the forest races had trusted each other on the battlefield. But battlefield trust is not the same as living together. Real acceptance would take roads, trade, work, food, and time. I approved it. When I told her I was at ease with her handling it, she lowered her head to hide a smile. Then another thought hit me. The next morning, before the sky fully brightened, the human camp prepared to leave. Half-caveman chefs made one last hot meal for the departing army, while kobold cooks surrounded them and wrote down seasoning ratios like their future depended on it. Infantry packed tents onto wagons. Knights checked horses, saddles, and harnesses in the mist. Inside her command tent, Leora finished checking maps and supply notes. Then the tent flap opened. She looked up, expecting Cadden. Instead, a young man walked in with black hair, delicate features, ordinary travel robes, and faint wheatear patterns deep in his pupils. Me, not my main body. A clone. Leora almost called me Dragon Lord, caught herself, and asked why I was there when I should be on Abundance Island. I told her I wanted to see the human world with my own eyes. Since hatching, I had known Sunset Forest, dragon inheritance, and reports from other people. But old memories from thousands of years ago were not enough to understand living civilization now. Practice produces true knowledge, so I had made a human-form clone and would travel with her to the forest earldom. The tribe would continue running under Alira and the others. My main body would remain inside the Abundance Gianmu, controlling the forest's ley lines. The clone was made through Gianmu, the power of abundance, and Dragon Clan soul spells. I did not tear off a piece of my soul like a reckless amateur. I imprinted a consciousness mark from my soul origin and let abundance nourish it. As long as my main body lived, the mark stayed synchronized. If the clone was destroyed, the mark would dissipate, and abundance would repair the loss naturally. Its strength was only about half of my main body. For traveling as a long-term outside incarnation, that was enough. I told Leora that in the human world, calling me Dragon Lord would be inconvenient. My temporary name would be Veyer. My identity would be her knight. A moment later, Leora walked out of the tent with me beside her. The camp noticed immediately. Cadden froze with dry rations in hand. Young knights whispered. One said I might be a noble envoy. Another guessed a messenger from Jaya. Within minutes, the rumor had evolved into the Grand Duke's illegitimate son, because soldiers apparently treat gossip like competitive alchemy. Then the favorite label arrived. A kept pretty boy knight. The low and middle noble officers especially hated the situation. Many had fought hard in Sunset Forest, hoping their military merit would earn knighthood, fiefs, and a way out of being spare noble children with no inheritance. Then some unknown young man with no crest, no recorded merit, and no visible battlefield history appeared beside the Count and ate the same carefully prepared meals she did. From their angle, the conclusion was obvious. Wrong, but obvious. They did not dare challenge me in front of Leora, so the rumors stayed around campfires. Leora ignored them. She had survived noble assemblies. This level of gossip was weather. I ignored them too. Killing rumors only makes them wear nicer clothes and come back louder. Better to let them talk until reality had enough time to embarrass them. Oral saw me instantly. He recognized the face, only without the dragon horns, then noticed my aura was far weaker than the main bodies. After a moment, the old swordsman quietly retreated into the shadows and decided he knew absolutely nothing. Excellent survival instinct, the army departed. Human infantry formed 4 columns. Knights rode along the edges. Supply wagons rolled behind. Leora and I traveled in the middle, while Oral rode his old gray horse at the rear, mentally suffering over whether he should call me my lord in the forest earldom or continue pretending blindness as a lifestyle. Rowan stayed behind at the camp entrance. He watched the army disappear, then turned back toward his new mountain of work: garrison, development, governor-general duties, and the long project of making humans and forest races build something together. Meanwhile, my clone rode north with Leora. My main body remained in the Abundance Jianmu, running a much less glamorous but equally important war: productivity reform. Now that Jianmu covered the ley lines, I could track resources across the forest with precision. Abundance could simulate and produce resources, but raw ability was not the same as efficiency. I needed distribution, production chains, optimized routes, better labor, better use of land, better everything. Tedious, boring, absolutely vital. Every conclusion my main body calculated through the forest reached the clone at once through synchronized consciousness. When I arrived in the forest earldom, I could compare Abundance's model against human production and see what should be copied, improved, or avoided. Day by day, the army marched through gossip and hidden plans. The deep forest thinned. Farmland appeared beside the road. Farmhouses stood in neat patches under the open sky. We had entered the border of the forest earldom. Ahead of me was human civilization, and for the first time since I broke out of my shell, I was going to see what kind of world I had actually been born into. The moment we entered the forest earldom properly, the road stopped looking like wilderness with tax records. Sparse farms became neat wheat fields and orchards. Farmers were already bent over for spring plowing. Stone houses replaced rough wooden sheds. Village wells were busy, and children stopped chasing each other just long enough to stare at the army coming back from Sunset Forest. This was my first real look at Leora's territory, and honestly, for a border earldom that had been through rebellion, demons, and noble nonsense, it looked far more alive than expected. The first noble waiting on the road was a local knight with carriages full of wine and cured meat. Leora accepted the supplies, thanked him, and kept marching. The knight sent a retainer home to report, then joined the triumph procession with his own people. After that, more nobles came. Nearby knights, representatives from baronial families, Chamber of Commerce envoys from western towns with grain, wine, and gift lists. Every group congratulated the Count of the Forest and asked to enter Forest City behind her in the triumph ceremony. Leora accepted them all. It was not just kindness. This was politics in formal clothes. For subordinate nobles, joining a victorious lord's triumph was political capital. Even if they only sent supplies, guarded the rear, or offered a handful of knights, they could later tell everyone their family stood with the Count in a major campaign. Very heroic, very useful, my grandfather once held a banner 3 streets away from history. Within days, the procession nearly doubled. Leora gave equal courtesy to nobles who brought several carts and nobles who brought only a few knights, because most of the ones coming forward were already willing to obey her new deal. That new deal was the real foundation of her rule. After inheriting the title, she saw that too many people in the territory still could not eat enough, and grain prices were too high. So she used the power of abundance to optimize crops, built exclusive farms in the Count's direct territory, and flooded the market with food until prices dropped. Then she used grain seeds as leverage to bargain with the nobles. The old peasant tax, which could reach 9/10 of the harvest, was pushed down to 5/10 or even 3/10. That was not a minor reform. That was taking a boot off the neck of the countryside. Most nobles had accepted the new tax system and trade rules over the past few years. A few diehards still resisted, and the worst was Baron Corvin Oral in the northeast corner of the earldom. He had the northern earl backing him, and had gathered more than a dozen small and mid-level nobles to openly reject Leora's new agricultural tax system. Before the Sunset Forest expedition, Leora had already planned to deal with him. The war delayed it. Now she was back with victory, territory, and an army. First came the triumph, then came the broom. Forest City appeared on the horizon not long after. I had heard Leora describe it before, but seeing it from horseback was different. The city wall was a living barrier made from giant trees standing close together, their crowns woven into a net and vines hanging down like a green rampart. The city gate was an arch grown from a tree trunk, sealed by heavy ironwood doors. Above the wall, there were no stone crenellations, only balconies and sentry posts shaped from branches and vines. Inside, the streets were smooth roads formed by interlaced roots. Tree crowns met overhead, making green tunnels over the city. Houses grew from living trunks, with doors and windows left open during growth. Some lower floors served as shops, while balconies curled above them from vines and branches. At the center stood the oldest giant tree, thick enough that dozens of people would need to link arms around it. Its branches formed a natural dome, and its roots became circular gathering steps. Even the street lanterns were luminescent flowers. This was not a city wearing plants as decoration. This was a city that had grown into infrastructure. I had seen concrete cities in my past life, alloy fortresses in the universe, and dragon-built strongholds inside inherited memory. But this was closer to what I wanted abundance to become. Not only a battlefield powers, not only a tool for growth and conquest, a way for ordinary people to live better. Leora rode beside me and said all of this came from me. Without me, none of it would exist, and she believed the world would eventually change because of me. Then the horn sounded above the city gate. The triumph began. The streets were packed. People shouted for the Count, for Leora, for the Apostle of God, for the Lord of Glory. I rode one horse length behind her as Knight Veyer, close enough to watch the crowd but far enough not to steal the scene. A farmer at the front yelled himself red in the face, because Leora's policies had pulled him out of hunger. Children tried to chase the procession until their elders hauled them back by the collars. An old woman who had survived the Flame Fiend rebellion shouted long life to Leora, and Leora turned her head to acknowledge her. The people's clothes were not new, but their smiles were real. That mattered. I had seen rulers cheered because they conquered. I had seen worship built on fear, banners, and power. This felt different. These people were cheering someone who lowered grain prices, rebuilt homes from ruins, and made sure children could wear padded clothes in winter. For a moment, I saw the girl who once knelt on Rock Hill with only a master-servant contract as her final gamble. Now she only had to ride through the street, and the whole city answered her. At the central plaza, the ruling class of the earldom had gathered. Nobles in ceremonial clothes, city councilors in dark robes with silver chains, Chamber of Commerce representatives holding gift lists tied with ribbons. Everyone willing to swear loyalty to Leora stood beneath the giant tree dome. Everyone except Baron Corvin Oral's diehard faction. Leora stopped in the center of the plaza and raised one hand, palm down. The message was simple: I have received your loyalty. The cheers rose again. The nobles stepped forward by rank, knelt one by one, and offered praise and allegiance. They all said the same thing in different noble packaging. They would continue following the Count of the Forest, whatever she chose next. Leora stayed composed through all of it. Not cold, not overwhelmed, just steady. She had learned how power rooms breathes. In only a few years, she had done what many lords never manage in a lifetime. And it was not only because of the dragon blood I gave her. At the edge of the plaza, I leaned against a tree and watched quietly. Meanwhile, my true body was still inside the Abundance Giantmu, doing the least glamorous miracle possible. Food logistics. The Abundance tribe could feed its current population. Half-elf farms were recovering. Kobold mushrooms were stable. Snake Man Island had provided inventory. Trade could fill gaps. But I did not want my people barely fed. I wanted every intelligent race under abundance to eat well and live warmly. The problem was scale. The power of abundance could simulate resources, but direct simulation consumed my energy. Fine for small amounts, terrible for a growing population. If kobolds and other fast-breeding races expanded, our food production would fall behind. So I needed an ecosystem. Waste became nutrients. Nutrients fed land. Land grew food. Food fed people. People produced more waste. The cycle repeated, simple on paper, disgusting in implementation. I extended my consciousness through the Giantmu ley lines and touched farmland and settlements across Sunset Forest. Where soil needed improvement, ordinary trees began to change. Their trunks swelled, golden-green lines spread through the bark. The center split open into a new organ between plant and beast, with a thick tongue and an inner cavity that led down into a stomach-like root pouch. This was the throat of abundance. Yes, the name is dramatic. The function is trash disposal with divine agriculture attached. Kitchen waste, dead branches, leaves, animal carcasses, feces. Anything organic could be piled at the roots. The tongue and roots would pull it in. The stomach pouch would decompose it with abundance-driven enzymes, and the nutrients would feed the soil through the root network. Its leaves would also secrete amber dew, a condensed liquid of the power of abundance. The dew could ripen crops or treat wounds. It was weaker than me doing it personally, but it supplied itself continuously, which meant I did not have to personally manage every field like a very overqualified watering can. I added one more feature, an automatic manual. Any abundance creature with even a little of my power would understand the tree's name and use the first time they saw it. No writing system required, no instruction board, no kobold being told 6 times and still asking whether the mouth tree eats boots. Across Sunset Forest, the first batch of throats formed. Near half-elf farmland, farmers pushing weeds and dead branches froze when the old tree used for tying cattle suddenly had a mouth. The name and instructions appeared in their minds. The oldest farmer tested it by dumping the cart near the roots. The tongue pulled everything in. Amber dew formed on the leaves. The soil around it began improving too slowly for eyes to catch, but fast enough that the next harvest would show it. In knoll hunting grounds, hunters piled stag organs and bones beside a throat, watched it swallow, then used the dew on a fresh wound. The cut healed quickly. Sivrin understood the strategic value first. He calculated that farmland inside a throat's influence would improve soil fertility almost 3 times faster. With amber dew ripening, food production could triple on the existing foundation. Better yet, it solved rotting carcasses and feces, which had been a nightmare for camp sanitation every summer. One tree handled fertilizer, healing dew, and waste management. Infrastructure had entered its unsettling mouth era. Sivrin wrote the conclusion into a report and added a note recommending that all future abundance facilities include the same automatic manual function, especially for races without writing systems. I approved the direction without lingering. The throat of abundance was only the first engine. Next came water. Sunset Forest had rain and streams, but distribution was a mess. High farms far from streams needed manual irrigation during dry seasons. Low areas flooded during rainy seasons. Swamp water rotted with demonic beast corpses and plants. Bad water meant miasma, disease, wasted land, and weak crops. So before growing anything new, I sent nature sprites through Jianmu's ley line passages to every major leader. Alira received the message while inspecting half-elf farms. New things would appear across the forest, so do not panic and keep working. Brack and Sivrin got the message near the Orline camp, while checking newly arrived dwarf forging equipment. Brack immediately remembered the trash-eating tree near the mushroom fields, and admitted it made the mushrooms grow several circles larger. Var received it while training new knoll hunters and gave the standby command. Grick received it while supervising Snakeman javelin throwers on Abundance Island, and restricted their training areas so no one wandered into fresh growth. Crag, Doran, and Nybek received the same warning. Within a short time, every race leader knew the rule. If something strange grew in the field, do not stab it first. Growth began after that. The first new system was Earth Lungs. Jianmu roots pushed seeds more than 10 meters underground near settlements that needed stable water. Under Abundance and Ley line water elements, each seed became a huge underground cyst shaped like an inverted heart. It pulsed slowly, filtering and purifying stored water before sending it through the root network. Wells became clearer. Surface water receded faster during rainy seasons. Dry season cracking would be delayed by several weeks. The second system was water-absorbing tundra. This looked like thick emerald moss spreading over the ground. Jianmu seeded it in places Earth Lungs could not cover well. Low swamp edges, polluted stream outlets, and muddy wastelands after heavy rain. Its job was purification and transfer. Rotten swamp water, muddy floodwater, and streams polluted by monster carcasses were absorbed into the moss. Impurities decomposed into harmless nutrients. Clean water traveled through the tundra roots and ley line network into the nearest Earth Lungs. Then, during dry seasons, the process reversed. Earth Lungs pushed stored clean water back into the tundra, and the moss grew transparent water packets half a person high. Farmers could roll those packets along field ridges to the throats of abundance. Once the packet sensed the throat's signal, its outer membrane slowly released water into the soil for several days, then decomposed into nutrients. No residue, no wasted hauling, no guessing which ditch had safe water, and which ditch wanted to send you to the ancestors. When the first earth lungs pulsed underground and the first tundra spread across the surface, the tribe finally understood why I had sent warnings. Half-elf farmers poked the first water packet and watched it wobble. Kobold miners gathered around clearer wells. Knoll hunters crossed old miasma ponds that had become green moss fields. From that point on, Sunset Forest had stable, clean water for agriculture and daily life. Abundance was not just winning battles anymore. It was building public utilities. Then Orlia finally woke up. Her last memory was platinum light descending from the sky, then darkness. In dreams, she had repeated the battle again and again, each time sharper, like her will was being tempered. When she opened her eyes, she found herself inside a protective vine dome glowing faint gold green. Her power had risen to level 20. She had reached the final level before legend. She had expected that step to take decades. Instead, she came to Sunset Forest, got blasted unconscious, took a divine nap and broke through. Bahamut's blessing has unusual customer service, but results are results. Orlia thanked Bahamut sincerely, then tore open the vine dome and crawled out. The battlefield stopped her cold. A few months ago, this place had been a charred ruin torn open by Tiamat's five-colored elemental torrent. Corpses had covered the ground. Blood, sulfur, and burned wood had filled the air. Now vines and flowers covered the scarred edges of the great gully. Waist-high grass and wildflowers grew at the bottom. Where bodies had once piled before the defense line, tall trees swayed in the wind. The rain of abundance had turned a massacre field into living ground. Then she saw the stone tablet. It recorded that in Verilek's calendar year 16,788, under the leadership of the great dragon Lord Varen, and with the help of many allies and friends, the Abundance tribe defeated the Snake Man army led by the evil green dragon Marith and liberated Sunset Forest. Recorded by Sivrin, Orlia read it once, then again. No Bahamut, no Orlia, not even a polite, special thanks to the gold dragon who got punted by Tiamat, but still bought critical time. Her anger came back instantly. She had helped. She had delayed the Saint clone. Bahamut had descended through her at the key moment. The victory absolutely carried his credit, and hers too. Yet the tablet had nothing. Sivrin's name went directly onto her personal grievance list. Before she could fly off to find me, a tiny nature sprite poked its head out of the ground in front of her. Orlia froze. The little creature was translucent, with leaf-like wings and dewdrops clinging to its body. It looked up at the adult gold dragon, then touched the tip of her claw with a hand thinner than a needle. Orlia's fury evaporated. The nature sprite grabbed her claw and tried with its entire tiny body to pull her toward the core area. Of course, I had sent it, but Orlia did not resist for even a second. She lifted her claw carefully so the sprite could hold on, spread her wings, and flew toward Abundance Island at a deliberately slow pace. The stone tablet score still existed. Sivrin was not forgiven, but for the moment, the tiny guide on her claw mattered more than 100 carved names. Orlia flew across more than half of Sunset Forest, with a nature sprite clinging to her claw. On the way to the core area, she saw things that made even a 200-year-old gold dragon slow down. Mouth trees by farmland swallowed dead branches and fallen leaves. Transparent water packets grew on emerald tundra, while half-elf farmers pushed them toward field ridges. Deep underground, something pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. The forest she remembered from a few months ago was gone. This was not just recovery. This was redesign. When she finally crossed the land bridge onto Abundance Island, she saw the Abundance Giantmu. The tree rose from the center of the island like a living pillar holding up the sky. Its trunk was so thick that over 100 warriors holding hands might not wrap around it. Golden green liquid moved through patterns in the bark like blood through veins. Roots spread through the island, sank into the earth, and even rose above ground as bridges and steps. The roots moved slowly, quietly, like the island itself was breathing. Above, the crown spread into a giant emerald canopy. Golden green light spheres hung from the branches, and sometimes scattered down to birth new nature sprites. Every breath carried so much vitality that living here felt like cheating time, as long as your body could withstand abundance. But Aurelia saw more than beauty. At level 20, half a step from legend, she could see the laws moving around it. The law of life flowed through the Jianmu, giving life to everything nearby. The law of flesh and blood intertwined with it, forming sacs and organs inside the tree that blurred the line between plant and animal. The law of devouring worked in the roots, turning death, rot, and waste into new nutrients. Countless laws revolved around the Jianmu like planets around a star. At the center was something she had never seen before. A power close to origins, something new to this world. Only then did Aurelia understand why Bahamut had sent her to Sunset Forest. This was never a simple support mission for a younger dragon in trouble. Bahamut had been paving the way for an aberrant dragon who might become a new star of the dragon clan. Aberrant dragons had existed before, but not like this, not one that made Tiamat and Bahamut descend at the same time and clash directly in the same plane. The owner of this tree already had the foundation for legend, maybe demigod, maybe even beyond. What he lacked was time. Aurelia lowered her head toward the deep canopy in respect, then followed the nature sprite down through the island's defenses. She landed beneath the Jianmu, and then I flew down. My true body came out of the canopy, over 9 meters long, and landed in front of her. Aurelia froze. I did not understand why at first. I had thanked her properly, acknowledged that she held back Tiamat's saint clone at the critical moment, and told her I would remember the favor. Then I asked what reward she wanted, as long as it was within my ability. Simple, clean, mature. A favor settled early is a future problem cancelled. Apparently, this was not the direction the conversation wanted to go. Aurelia tried to wave it off, saying she only obeyed Bahamut's divine decree and that fighting evil Tiamat was a rare experience. Her voice was softer than expected, and her tail kept moving behind her like it had not been informed that we were having a formal conversation. I insisted she ask for something. She thought it through. Jianmu was impossible. Black oil was useless to a gold dragon. Territory did not interest her. Treasure she already had. After running through everything abundance owned, she looked away and asked one question. Did I have a partner? I froze. Audience, I had faced Tiamat's saint clone without choking this hard. I was prepared for resources, contracts, weapons, an alliance, maybe a ridiculous dragon treasure request. I was not prepared for a 200-year-old adult gold dragon asking whether I was single while nature sprites watched from the branches like tiny village elders at a wedding gate. For a moment, I had no words. Then I told her the truths. I was only 11 years old. Aurelia stopped functioning. Her pupils widened. Her tail stiffened. She asked again because clearly her brain wanted an appeal process. Yes, 11 years since birth. That was a young dragon by Dragon Clan standards. A normal 11-year-old dragon should still be learning to hunt, hiding under a mother's protection, or surviving in a cave and worrying about the menu. I had conquered kobolds after hatching, fought ogres before 10, contracted half-elves while still a young dragon, annexed the snakemen, defeated Marith, and faced Tiamat. So I understood the confusion. I did not look my age. Aurelia, however, had just accidentally expressed interest in a young dragon. She spread her wings and fled. Not left, fled. The golden blur crossed Abundance Island so fast that the nature sprites only saw afterimage and regret. I watched her disappear, rubbed my nose, and wondered whether I really looked that mature. Then I decided to stop thinking about it, because Jianmu still needed me for the next production plans, and I had already been psychologically ambushed enough for one morning. Aurelia found a sandy patch far from Abundance Island and buried herself headfirst in it. This was not metaphorical. Adult gold dragon, apostle of Bahamut, level 20 powerhouse, halfway to legend, head in sand, tail outside. She prayed to Bahamut in pure shame, apologizing because she had unknowingly asked that question to an 11-year-old dragon. In Mount Celestia, Bahamut laughed hard enough that the angels around his divine kingdom did not know where to look. Then he sent her a divine decree. He told Aurelia she had not done wrong. It was only the wrong time. She could wait until I grew into a young adult dragon. For dragons, a few decades was not long. He also said he would speak to her parents personally and explained that she was going out to execute his mission for a few decades. That one message restored her completely. Apparently, divine comfort works best when it also handles parent management. Far away on Northern Dragon Island, 2 legendary gold dragons suddenly felt a strange unease. like something precious had quietly started packing. Oralia crawled out of the sand, cleaned herself with magic, and rebuilt her confidence. If timing was the issue, she could wait. But waiting from far away was inefficient. So she made a plan. Stay close to me first, live on Abundance Island, observe the Giantmu, and let time do what time does for dragons. She flew back. The island defenders saw her return and wisely did nothing. A kobold crossbowman whispered that the gold dragon was back, and a half-elf mage quietly reminded him to keep staring at the weapon and not volunteer for problems. Oralia landed in front of me again. I had spent the whole time mentally drafting polite refusal lines and rejecting all of them. Then she returned with a clean request. She wanted to join the Abundance tribe. That would be my repayment for her favor. She also wanted to live on Abundance Island, officially because observing the Giantmu up close would help her become a legend. Officially, sure, I accepted almost immediately. A level 20 adult gold dragon joining Abundance solved one of our biggest weaknesses. Before this, our high-end power rested mostly with Alira, Leora, Brack, Sivrin Var, and the others around level 10 to 14. Oral was level 16, but he was a guest elder old, and not exactly a normal military asset. Oralia was different. Beneath legend, a level 20 gold dragon was top-tier power in the entire region around Sunset Forest. She was also Bahamut's apostle. Her joining told every surrounding faction that Abundance was not just a monster tribe, and definitely not another fear-rule green dragon regime like Marith's. It carried divine political weight. The cost was maybe sacrificing my face a little in the future. Terrible burden, I would survive. Besides, by Dragon Clan aesthetics, Oralia was genuinely outstanding. Golden scales, graceful body, clean horn curve, the whole premium ancient dragon beauty standard. I did not say that out loud because I enjoy living. I pointed her toward a cliff on the east side of Abundance Island near the lakeshore. It was close enough to Giantmu and suitable for a private nest. Nature sprites circled around her horns, clearly approving the new island drama. Oralia flew toward the cliff already looking like she had planned the next few decades. I returned into the Giantmu canopy. What I did not know was that the laws around the Abundance Giantmu had gained another one. Charm. The law of charm did not invent anything fake. It magnified traits already there. The warmth of abundance, the unique pull of an aberrant dragon, and the life affinity of the Giantmu host. Those qualities became easier for others to sense. And as more laws gathered around the Giantmu, the tree's status rose. The higher the Giantmu rose, the more it nourished me. That cycle had already begun. Meanwhile, from the eastern mountains, Greycastle's artisan group entered Sunset Forest earlier than the formal five-party talks. The team leader was Keldrin Greycastle, a rank 15 dwarf blacksmith great master. Greycastle had only 3 blacksmiths of that rank, and Keldrin was one of the tribe's core holders of black oil refining technology. With him came more than 100 artisans, and a rank 16 dwarf warrior bodyguard named Torvak Greycastle. Borin had not sent scraps. He sent backbone craftsmen in forging, smelting, and mining, hand-picked from the tribe, partly to honor the agreement. 100 artisans for 10 years in exchange for black oil quotas and a joint refining station. Partly because the earlier Greycastle settled people into abundance, the more information advantage they would have at the five-party talks 3 months later. The moment they entered Sunset Forest, a half-elf ranger was already waiting to guide them. I had sensed them through the ley lines. Keldrin rode a mountain pony at the front, taking notes every time something caught his eye. He had spent almost 200 years around furnaces. He had seen the Dwarf Kingdom's finest workshops and human knockoff equipment. He thought Surprise had retired from his life. Then he met the throat of abundance. The mouth tree calmly rolled garbage into itself, while young apprentices stared like their education had been personally insulted. Keldrin walked around it twice and felt the improved soil nearby. His mind immediately went to Greycastle's old slag problem. Furnace waste had piled around their mines for thousands of years, taking space and poisoning groundwater during rain. If this recycling system could handle slag treatment, the savings would be enormous. He asked the guide what it was called. The half-elf ranger proudly answered that it was the Throat of Abundance, designed by the Dragon Lord for agriculture. Keldrin wrote symbols in his notebook and moved on. Then he saw the water-absorbing tundra. A kobold farmer pushed a half-person-high transparent water packet along a ridge toward a throat of abundance. Keldrin crouched, touched the moss, then poured the remaining ale from his water skin and filled it with a sample of water seeping from the packet. He tasted it sweet. He sealed the water skin and kept it for later study. By this point, he was certain Abundance was not an ordinary monster tribe. Torvak cared less about farming and more about danger. He was there to ensure all dwarf artisans reached Abundance Island alive, not to admire moss. Then he saw the Abundance Gigi on the island platforms. He stopped the team. The living ballistas glowed faintly golden green in sunlight, and Torvak's battlefield instincts screamed that these were not decorations. Keldrin came over and approached the nearest platform. Grick happened to be patrolling and followed. Keldrin inspected the weapon closely. A dark green energy vine ran from the Gigi into the ground, feeding from the ley lines. The connection pulsed with steady power. The crossbow arm was not dead wood or metal. It was alive. Keldrin asked if the thing was living. Grick confirmed it. The Dragon Lord had created it, and its purpose did not need much explanation. Torvak asked whether Keldrin could dismantle it, because every warrior instinct he owned disliked standing near it. Keldrin answered honestly, he was not sure. The Gigi was unlike dwarven machinery, unlike standard alchemical artifacts, and unlike almost anything in the world. If he had to describe it, it felt like something that did not belong to this world at all. The artisan group continued deeper into Abundance Island. The apprentices chattered about every strange creation they had seen, but Keldrin kept returning to one thought. Everything from the throat to the tundra to the Gigi felt deliberately shown to them. And Abundance had only existed for about 10 years. 10 years was nothing to dwarves, not even a full apprenticeship. Yet this young tribe had built a system Keldrin had never seen. Of course, from my side, it was not simply 10 years of work. It was Abundance as a universal energy source, my life experience across worlds, the Jianmu network, and a forest finally connected enough to use all of it. But the dwarves did not know that. They only saw a monster tribe that had started inventing infrastructure faster than old kingdoms could file reports. And that was exactly what I wanted Greycastle to see.